Cheers! It is Tuesday, June 5th, and this is your Cup of Jones. I like having the mic. I like using this mic for Cup of Jones, but it's tricky because I don't know where to put the cup. That's like one of the only tricks about the new setup. Is where does the cup go? Does it go over here? Hi, cheers, everybody. I like around the mic to give the cup prominence. Because I like kind of having the setup here. You know, I got my laptop. Doctor Who fan, in case you haven't realized. It's nice having my phone nearby. Let me get my phone on cam. Make sure just everything is here. I've never looked better. That's not true. I'm going to be 40 next year, and surely I've had better years. I'm in a downhill slope, everybody. It's all going down. There are some allies, you know, your Brad Ellis's, your Don Casanovas that are in their prime right now, but not me. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Cup of Jones. We don't have a ton of stuff to go over before we jump right into feedback for business, and we got a tabletop shoot coming up at 1 p.m., so I want to make sure to get out of the way before then. If you weren't here last week, check it out. New setup. It's interesting because a lot of people were like, whoa, everything looks good. And that means they didn't see the podcast, which I think is interesting. Like, that's a Patreon user that only watches Cup of Jones and, like, missed out on Friend Code, missed out on Frame Trap, missed out on the podcast. And this was their first introduction to the new studio. All this equipment was not just set up for Cup of Jones. This is set up for, of course, our E3 coverage, which begins Saturday morning at 10 a.m. But there's also other shows that we do that are going to benefit from the new camera and everything like that. I thought it looked a little bit washed out. I think Ian's been messing around with the camera settings, and so I set it up and I was like super bright. And a lot of people last week are like, wow, Jones, you look really tired. And I didn't know if I wanted super bright, so I changed it to a different setting that looked okay. But we're still working out the kinks. There were a lot of questions, a couple questions that I did skip, that I did favorite in the comments of last week's Cup of Jones. There were very, very specific technical questions, and if I did not answer your question or address it in this episode of Cup of Jones, that means you're right. We know, that's a thing we're going to experiment with, or that might change in the next episode of Cup of Jones or the podcast or whatever. So, yeah, the shirt I'm wearing today is Nerds Vote. Today is, you can go to nerdsvote.com. Nerdsvote.com is a fun organization that is planning nerd events and registration events for voting at the same time. So you can go and be like, oh, hey, look at these celebrities. I can get their autographs and meet. And, oh, look, I'll register to vote at the same time. So if you are in California, and I know many of you aren't, today's the day to vote. I'm going to be, the moment this Cup of Jones ends, I'm going to be getting in my car with my lovely wife, and we're going to be going to vote. So don't forget, if you're in California, get out to the polls today. Ladies and gentlemen, drumroll please, we are above 46K. We did it. We set up new goals. We did not hit those in May. We had a wonderful spike in April, along with a lovely fundraiser. That was the reason we were able to afford all of this lovely new equipment. But we are now officially above 46K as of June. And that means you will be getting the Easy Allies Countdown. We will be starting, I don't know if we're technically we're going to call it. I don't know if it's going to be the Easy Allies Countdown or Easy Allies Top 10, but that'll be after E3. We had some ideas about some stuff, you know, Top 10 anticipated of E3 and other stuff that we had done back at Game Trailers, but we already have plenty of work to do for our E3 coverage this year. Also turn the mic up a little bit this week, so hopefully it's a little bit louder. But as I listen to this episode, I might do further adjustments for next week. And I said E3 starts this Saturday morning, 10 a.m. It's kind of a bummer because Saturday is going to be the Electronic Arts Press Conference, which is hosted by Andrea Rene. If you missed that this week, Andrea Rene will be hosting the EA Play Press Conference, the EA Play Conference. And so it'll be a little bit of a false start because we're gonna crack it open and we're gonna be like, hey, it's E3, let's do this, and then our Electronic Arts, and then okay, we'll see you tomorrow. Then we're all gonna bail and go do other things and prepare for Saturday. And then, of course, you got Saturday, Sunday, both with at least 3 or 4 press conferences each day. Nintendo's Tuesday morning. We have a request in this Cup of Jones for a promo on our YouTube channel. That promo is coming, and that will detail all of the stuff that we're going to do and the times of when you can check us out. Basically, it'll list the start times, because once you check in with us in the morning, we're going to be streaming all day until that last press conference is over. So we hope you join us. We're excited to have a couple weeks to iron out some of the kinks with this equipment and get really cozy with it. And I am definitely cozy with the new setup of Cup of Jones. So let's get into it. But thank you, everybody. Thank you, patrons, for helping us get above 46K. We have had, like I said, a couple weeks ago, we got above 7,000 patrons. We have really nice, cozy growth here at patreon.com/easyallies. And, being above 46K was, ahead of my expectations. I didn't think that was going to happen, that early, but, we are there. And, we had a wonderful meeting yesterday, mostly E3 related, but we also talked about potentially new goals and there's some discussion, some worries out there about our studio setup and what we're going to do when we get the studio and what we're going to do to get the studio, to keep the studio. A lot of those are big topics we talked about. I am a big nerd for sure. Top 10 EZA title belts. All right, let's get into it. Daniel M., any chance we're going to see the Gunpla streams return? Yes, when the boys have time to do it. If you're not familiar, Brad Ellis, Ben Moore, and Kyle Bossman get together to build Gundams. I join them sometimes to build Lego sets, and Kyle is currently knee-deep in Box Peak production and will be for a while. So, and that also kind of speaks to the new style at Easy Allies of having seasonal shows. Busted Trifecta is definitely a limited run season. If you haven't seen that is Don Casanova's horse racing epic that is now part 3 went up last week. And Kyle's going to be doing one season of Box Peak. We'll be doing 10 episodes of that. We are very soon going to be premiering And For That Reason, which is our Patreon exclusive show. All of you don't need to worry about that because you're all $1 above patrons, so you get to check that out. And we are interested in doing more of those in the future, seasons of shows, specific stuff. And so Easy Anime is kind of the same thing. We had I don't know if it was planned as a season, but we had season 1 of Easy Anime. That show might return at a later date. But in the interest of testing some things and trying stuff out, we don't want to keep having the language of here's our brand new thing we're going to do forever. Oh, we're tired of doing that. We want to introduce some things that are not directly related to the Patreon as being just kind of test runs. Let's just do a couple episodes of this and see how it goes. It's worked out for TV. It'll work out for us. Brandon K. Gann, what's the issue of having the video being watched live for all? Don't get me wrong. I completely understand the necessity of having only questions. This is the Q&A, sorry. The patron Q&A, which we do at the end of each month. Don't get me wrong, I completely understand the necessity of having only questions taken by patrons at that tier. It just always has felt like a disconnect to me to be able to watch it after the fact. If the video was forever locked behind the $20 tier instead of being ever publicly viewed, I can understand that because it provides more value to the tier beyond just submitting a question, akin to love and respect, with obvious differences of course. On the flip side, if EZA is willing to let people watch the video after a set period, why not open it up live for everyone to see as it's being recorded? Once it's over, people who missed it could watch if they couldn't catch it live, like how the video is normally made available, just a bit sooner. Brandon, I wish I could give you a really long, detailed, fascinating, worthwhile response to that question, but I don't know. Those are good questions. I didn't write that on feedback. But boom. Or I'm sorry, on takeaways, but I will write that and address that with the rest of the group. Because my association with the Q&A is I show up when we do it. I will not be at the Q&A, unfortunately, for June, but and I answer questions and I have a good time with the other allies. And I have not really paid a lot of attention as to when that goes public to other people who can see it when we stream it. And so that is... Ben Moore hosts that, puts all the questions together, and Daniel Bloodworth transitions that over to the rest of our YouTube community. So he can maybe speak to some specifics if he is... You always hope Bloodworth is sleeping in. I hope he misses this Cup of Jones, just to get some rest, because we'll need it. Tyler Travis, have you guys been scoping out studios around town yet? And if so, do you have some lined up? What would be the wait time to actually get in there? More than a month. If we hit the 50K goal, that's great. We need to take some time to figure out what is going to be available at the time. It's not, if you're going to buy a car, or you're going to, I mean, it depends on where you buy the car from. If you're going to rent an apartment or buy a house, you can't just like tell somebody like, hey, hold on to this house for me for 6 months because I don't know when I'm moving. You have to pay for that. And obviously, if we hit that 50K goal, that's great. But that will, I think, buy us maybe 1 month's worth of rent until we actually make that move to move in. Obviously, we need to make sure we secure that 50K level for over a month, and we can go into the second month and be at the same level. We don't want people to bump us up to that 50K and then drop right away. The process of not only picking a place, but there's so many factors. There are neighborhoods that I've looked at that I think are interesting. There are other studios that I've visited, from game development to streaming, very similar to what we do, to something akin more to a Defy setup where they have studios, but they also have cubicles and desk areas and stuff like that. Again, we talked about this a lot at the meeting this week about what are our expectations for our studio and what are we going to do once we hit that 50K level to maintain that financial level so we can keep the studio. So yeah, we don't have any lined up. But yeah, I have looked in a lot of areas, and I have not discussed with them what their internet is like. We have not investigated what parking is like in that area beyond just taking a glance. Yes and no. The wait time will, like I said, will probably be about a full month, definitely 4 weeks before we can able to make sure everything is ready to go. Cubicle it up. Yeah, that's just what we need, all the allies and cubicles. Corey Swafford. With this new setup, will Ian... Will Ian never have a seat at the desk again since he's on the switcher? It'd be great that it's great that he'll be there for every episode, and I know he can still chime in during discussions, but I hate for him to forever be placed in the background and reduced to just chiming in occasionally. Or am I mistaken, and do you plan on having that position be an equal part of the discussions? Ian can be a part of the discussion whenever he likes, just as you said, the new position of Ian on the switcher for the Easy Allies podcast, and we will have people on the switcher for our E3 coverage as well, as we have before. Not on the switcher, but just on the PC. That was Ian's idea, actually. That had kind of come up into my mind that we could do that with the switcher, but Ian really wanted that switcher, and then when it became a reality that we were going to get it, he's like, hey, so I guess I'm back on the Easy Allies podcast. So Ian put himself in that chair, and I think that is... where Ian wants to be for the foreseeable future. One thing that will definitely happen as we produce more content here in the garage for live streams and for regular shows is that people like myself, Michael Damiani, possibly your Kyle Bossmans, and anyone else who is interested can get comfortable with that switcher. I think... Ian has a really looking at what we produced with the first episode of the podcast with the new setup is that Ian has a really good feel for like when the camera should switch. And so I think it's beyond just understanding how the technology works. I think it's understanding the flow of the conversation, and you don't want to cut like too much. You want to find those opportunities of like, oh, I think Jones is going to go off for a little bit on this. Boop, I'll go to the Jones shot, one point that somebody brought up is that we held on a very long shot before Kyle started talking. We were like, we should probably hold on a wide shot when it, fades in and you see the Easy Allies podcast logo, and then we go to Kyle when he started talking. So, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if you see other people on that switcher at some point. I just don't want to make promises of when that is, because I don't want to like kick Ian out of that chair if he's really enjoying it. I think Ian likes being on that switcher. We're happy that we have it, and Ian likes to use it. Cash. With all the new equipment, how do you fare for space in the garage? Space is actually okay. We haven't had any issues. Again, we set up a bunch of new lights, and those are up there. Those don't necessarily take up more space. A lot of their plugs and stuff like that are wrapped around the beams that I have up in the top of the room, and those go out to control units that are all hanging from the wall. We actually have a little bit more space than we used to over there at the PC desk because the monitors in the PC are now elevated, and so they don't take up space on the desk, and we're not like reaching around the monitors to try to get to stuff. So it's pretty much equal. We take a little more care with this back section, so like maybe I don't have the space to just like put a bunch of crap on there because I don't want it to get dirty. But other than that, we're okay. Yeah, out of all of the changes that have happened in the garage, having less space is not one of them. If anything, we've over time, because I also took this opportunity not just to set up the new equipment, but to like clean the garage a little bit. And I think I noticed some things here and there that I'm like, we don't need this. We set that up and I don't use that anymore. So let's get it out of the garage. My guest room inside of my house is a mess right now. You should see that. I should take a picture of that, but I won't. Alexander Zirianov. How about streaming a full playthrough of Detroit Become Human during Easy Living? You can assign 3 allies to each character or pass the controller after each chapter. I believe this can be a fun stream similar to Until Dawn stream back at GT, which I think many of us really loved. I will take that into consideration, Alexander Zirianov. I can't make any promises. I believe it's like a 15, 16-hour game. So that's a pretty good, healthy chunk. That's definitely way more time than we spent playing Super Mario Sunshine. So I like the idea of doing a full playthrough. I don't know if I like the idea of doing a full playthrough that's more than 10 hours. One thing that we talked about for Easy Living, though, was to invest in games more and not just keep swapping games out, but maybe not play so many games, maybe invest in the games that we are playing a little bit more. So maybe that might be just what the doctor ordered, but I don't know. I will say that we've definitely had that conversation. That has definitely come up. We lovingly refer to the Until Dawn stream back at Game Trailers as one of like our favorite things. Especially because we are streaming way more as Easy Allies than we did at GT. And so that was like a rare example of like your group stream basically. And I think that's why that was so special, was we were like, hey, when we all get together in a room and play video games, it's pretty great. So Easy Living is just one full playthrough of Yakuza 0. Yeah, sure. Jasmine's excited for Easy Living. That's awesome. Julian. Julian, I remember reading your question. I don't know why it didn't make it into the document. Mistakes happen. Julian wrote a lovely question last week. I skipped it because I'm a human being. But let's do it. I will give it a very thoughtful response this week. Can you please talk to us about the difficulty in meeting developers, forging relationships with them, and grading their work? Have people confronted you before because of how you scored a game? How do you define the line for yourself between being a critic and becoming cynical to personal relationships in the industry? Good question. I'm just saying this personally. All of this is just going to be personal Jones talk. Even though this is technically a business question, because this does pertain directly to our business. That is our business, and is meeting developers and going to check stuff out. I just got through Judges Week. We are treated like kings and queens during Judges Week. We're provided with many sliders and tacos and salads and coffee and donuts, and then they're like, hey, play our fancy games. And so here we are, not scoring stuff, but talking about impressions from those things as we lead up to E3. Stay tuned for more of that. Judges Week takes. The embargoes are popping this week, and we'll be lifting next week as well. And so we still have yet to have many conversations about that stuff. One thing is experience. Just doing this more, I get more comfortable with the idea of, meeting Cory Barlog and being like, hey, you're great. I think your game is great. I'm not giving it a 10 because I think you're great. We're not giving God of War a 10 because we're like, have some crazy bias towards Sony or some crazy bias towards the God of War franchise. Like, there's always that fresh feeling whenever you crack open a game, you start a game for the first time. I was very into Far Cry 4. I think that was one of the best shooters of this generation. I think that was a very advanced FPS when that first came out. And I had a lot of issues with Far Cry 5. And so it's interesting. It's like some people would argue that, you would favor a game more if you're more into a franchise. I might be in a bad position because I'm just so excited for Red Dead, but at the same time, I'm going to be so critical of Red Dead. Like, I'm so excited for that game, but I have so many expectations. And having played GTA 5 as much as I've had, and them taking so long in developing Red Dead, I definitely have ideas for how good I think that game should be, based on Rockstar's pedigree and based on what I think they can accomplish. And so I think it's a double-edged sword. Being into something, having a relationship with those developers, knowing what a certain team is capable of, and having your own personal thoughts over what quality levels you think a game will achieve. One thing that I don't agree with is I see some people sometimes when they will say something harsh, or they'll post a crazy headline about a company that will harm a company, and they have this idea where they're like, look, we're not friends. I'm not friends with this company. I'm not here to make friends. I'm here to deliver the news. I'm here to review games. I'm not here to make friends. And maybe this is just my personality and me, but like making friends in this industry has been unavoidable. But it's a special type of friend because it's somebody that I will only see because of business. But that also extends to people like Greg Miller or people I used to work with at Game Trailers. I don't see a lot of them anymore because I only saw them because we work together, and we can still hang out at maybe events when we bump into each other. There's a question coming up later that's like, who are you looking forward to seeing at E3? And it's fun to see those people that are not in California anymore, not in Los Angeles anymore, and are working elsewhere. And I allow myself to be friends with them and to consider them friends, even though we would not be even having this conversation if we were not at this preview event together, if we were not at Judges Week together or E3, or I wasn't going, to hang out with them only just to appear on their shows or whatever. Like, I think this industry is full of those bizarre relationships, and I would be sad if I personally didn't consider those people friends or they didn't consider me friends. I think we can be cordial. I think we can be civil when we're working together, and I think there are different layers of friendship. So I definitely consider some developers friends. I consider John Vignacchi a friend, and I bring up John Vignacchi, the former head of Disney Interactive, because John Vignacchi to date is one of the only developers to give me crap behind the camera or in front of the camera. He did it in front of the camera. You can go visit. It was his second appearance on GT Live to talk about Disney Infinity, and I gave Disney Infinity 3.0 an 8. 8.2, I think I gave it an 8.2, and he was not happy about that. And you could see me do a double take because I was like, wow, that never happens, where someone's like, oh great, yeah, thanks for that score there. I have actually been kind of nervous in the past because I have given a game a bad score. And not a bad score, but a competitive score. A score, a game was not as good as I thought it was going to be. And then I met the team and was like, hey, what's up, at some event later, or the publishers at some event for some other thing. And they were totally fine. Like, they don't, I've rarely found, if ever, any weird grudges like that in this biz. People tend to be pretty, I think there's a sense of awareness of the realities of this business when you're dealing with people. And just like you don't want to burn any bridges if you're in my position, meaning, you can publish stories about people if you find out about stuff, and you can score games, based on what you believe is fair. But you shouldn't live in fear over what people are going to think of you, because that's what we do. And you never know why anyone's going to have an opinion about a certain game. So that's why I try not to blame people for their opinions. I try. So yeah, sorry for skipping your question, Julian. Hopefully that fit the bill. Benny Samuelson, speaking of clips from E3, how will I avoid spoilers and go right to the reaction videos if I have to watch them after the fact? Can you send out links from Patreon to the reaction videos somehow so I don't have to go to YouTube? I always get spoiled for trailers released during the press conferences when going to YouTube or researching videos during E3. So, Benny, this is fascinating, and I don't know if we're going to put something together like this before we go live or this weekend, but it is a peculiar request, and I see where you're coming from. But basically what Benny is saying is, I'm in another time zone, so I'm not going to have time to watch any of these press conferences live. So if I miss the EA press conference, and then I go to YouTube, the first thing is not going to be the EA press conference. It's going to be, oh my god, look at this Anthem gameplay, and I don't want to see that yet. I want to see whoa, look at this crazy indie game that they announced. Whoa, look at great how good Battlefield 5 looks. And so I just want to watch the press conference. How do I find those links without being spoiled by the other links? And that's such a specific request, especially because I'm assuming you're going to be catching up on Saturday's events on Sunday, Sunday's events on Monday, and Monday's events on Tuesday. And so that means every single day we'd have to do a Patreon post that's just hey, here's the press conference. And I think that would help a very small percentage of our Patreon community, and a much larger percentage of people would be like, what? Why is this? There's just, out of all of the posts we're going to be making during E3, but avoid all social media blackout. Yeah, it's not a matter of media blackout. It's when the media blackout is over and you actually then are okay, it's time to go do that. If you media blacked out for a movie or a TV show, you would just go watch that. The internet wouldn't be in your way when you're on Apple TV or buying a ticket for the movie theater, unless there's some jerk in the lobby that feels like spoiling it for you. as happened to my friends as we were walking into Avengers Infinity War. Thanks to that jerk. But I will bring it up to the crew. Benny, I will put that as a takeaway. Only Patreon posts. Maybe we can make that a specific tier. No, that's a terrible idea. But thank you, Benny. I never thought about that before, ever. So thank you for putting that into my brain. Vittorio Pedroni. With EZA taking place in your garage, has your electrical bandwidth, electrical and bandwidth consumption skyrocketed? Did you switch to a business offer? Not for the electrical. I mentioned this many times on Cup of Jones, but I wanted to get an electrician to come out to take a gander at how we're doing in the studio. We haven't died yet. Knock on wood. The power hasn't gone out because we were very careful about regulating what's plugged into what outlet. And we now know I have a diagram of like the breakers outside, what breaker is hooked up to what outlet. And we did, but yeah, we you know, the energy bill is nothing to sneeze at. And our bandwidth has improved because we upped our internet. So we definitely did some quality of life improvements. We got a security camera. We got heightened security equipment here in the garage. We've upped our insurance, and we upped our internet. So we are now at the tippy top of our internet provider. So, yay. M Legend, what camera was used to film the original Allies Assemble and Patreon announcement videos in the Easy Allies YouTube channel? The answer, so if you missed that, the original, you know, Blood in the Jacuzzi and me, you know, thank you, Lightning, for giving me the inspiration to call over the Allies and gather them all together. That was a Sony EX1. What happened to it? We borrowed that from my friend Mike Buddy, who has a production studio, not a production studio. I mean, he does his own stuff every now and then, but has a camera and lighting equipment company called Lightspeed. Lightspeed Grip and Lighting, I believe. Lightspeed LA, I think is their website. Lightspeedla.com. And he let us borrow it because he owes me lots of favors still. So we borrowed it and then gave it back. And the camera that we used to shoot the Easy Allies podcast for a good long while, I think maybe like a year, a little under a year, was also borrowed from Buddy and his company. So, in my opinion, those two videos contain the most professional, natural, and correct-looking footage you guys have ever produced. If you guys could recreate that look with the FS5 and all of the micro studio cameras, I think you would be golden. By the way, Cup of Jones looks pretty good for your first time using the new setup. Thank you, M Legend. Curious if it looks better or worse today. This Mike Buddy is a good friend. It's Budde, but yeah, it's he is a buddy. Mike Buddy, wherever he goes, I wanna go. Mike Buddy. Mike Buddy rents camera equipment. Stefan Bean, what would it cost to make Easy Allies go all in on 4K? Would like to see you guys as sharp as possible on my shiny new TV. Yes, a lot of people ask that stuff because we do have 4K capable cameras, but we are not recording in 4K. We are not streaming in 4K because that's impossible. There's no streaming in 4K yet, at least on Twitch. And we are not shooting in 4K because I cut the podcast on my laptop. I like to... I'm just speaking for the laptop. Giving you one example for the podcast, Easy Allies podcast. So I shoot that on my laptop. We take the cards out of the camera, and then I transfer that stuff, as I will later tonight, onto my laptop, and then have the footage locally on my laptop. I prefer to do that than to cut off of drives, because it slows stuff down, and drives are terrifying, because drives fail. And, laptops fail as well, but that's a whole different situation. And 4K just means drives for everything. There's no computer any of us own that would be able to hold the footage from any show that we produce. Considering most of our podcasts are over an hour, that would be... there's just no computer that could hold that stuff. And so then that's another expense of getting drives that could do that. Not only drives for us, but drives for Ben when he takes Frame Trap home, drives for Damiani when he takes Friend Code home, drives for Ian when he takes Tabletop home, or Easy Update, or any of that stuff. So 4K isn't going to make your stuff better, just sharper. Yeah, and that's, sharper's great. Like, that would be fun. And there will be someday when we'll be like, okay, we need to do 4K. But it was kind of the same situation at Game Trailers when everybody up to 1080p. We're like, we kind of did 720p for a long time, and as you may or may not know, it was very frustrating getting technical advancements to be implemented on GameTrailers.com physically on the website. It was very easy to upload stuff to YouTube, but we didn't get that opportunity for a very long time. So it just takes a long time to adapt to this technology when there is this up-res, and you really have to ask yourself, for people in a position like ours, is that something that we need to do? Or is that something, are you really coming to EasyAllies.com for like the killer game footage to be seen in all of its 4K glory? Or can you just go get that straight from the horse's mouth, straight from the fire hose of the publisher releasing all of that stuff themselves, and just come to us for analysis? And our analysis, us just sitting at desks talking to each other, does that need to be in 4K? Eventually it will, but for right now it is not, especially with the new equipment. We were more interested in getting all of the improvements that I have detailed, and not necessarily upgrading everything to 4K just yet. Sven Van Latham, do the other allies watch Cup of Jones as well? Or are you giving them small feedback from it? I ask this because sometimes I feel that they don't know previous requests in the community that the community had here on Cup of Jones. For example, a couple of months ago, somebody asked if it would be possible to change the dates and the titles to be more worldwide friendly. May 12th, 2018 instead of 5/12/18. This has been done once, and then he went back to the old way. I'm guessing Ian, Don, and Damiani aren't aware of this. Just an example, but you get my point. The thing is, sometimes you answer, that's Kyle's decision, that's Huber's call, but are they aware of your questions here? P.S. I know that Blood does, of course. Yes. Maybe my problem is I don't have a lot of follow-through, so I will offer suggestions to allies and say, hey, this came up on Cup of Jones. I do have a big takeaways list that every now and then I will address. We have our big takeaway list that was given to me a couple weeks ago from a patron whose name is escaping me right now. I'm sorry, but and I wasn't gonna bring that up this month. I will bring that up at the end of the month in June, just kind of like, hey, this is Cup of Jones for the last year. Some of this stuff I brought up to you, some of the stuff I know you've done, some of the stuff I know we can't do, but it's just worth having a conversation about. But yeah, and I don't necessarily have like a specific Cup of Jones moment where everybody gathers around the campfire and I say, here are all the new Cup of Jones news. I will just grab someone individually and tell them, hey, this came up on Cup of Jones. What do you think about that? I admit I am not always the best at then relaying that information back on Cup of Jones and letting you know I spoke to them, they weren't interested, or they might have had issues with that. In the case of this, like, that was definitely something that I brought up. I don't know why those specific people producing those shows. I have changed that on Cup of Jones, so I did put that into place moving forward. But it's tricky when all of us have our own shows because we will post stuff. There's another question coming up later about, like, why are all the crazy titles different? So yeah, everybody's got their own personalities. And I think across the board, I think one thing that we should do down the road at another point where we need to upgrade Easy Allies, potentially when we get into a new studio, or to provide more value to our users and viewers. I took viewers and users and put them together into viewers. For our viewers at home, if we want to up our production value again, there are things we can do to streamline the production of all of our shows, and that could be a part of it, the titling and thumbnails and stuff like that. Soren, yeah, I get a little more parched under the lights this time. Gotta take more sips. Soren Lundquist. On the Easy Allies Patreon page, it says 33,636, which is a dip of 13K from what you said this episode. Did any of you see that? Did you miss that? That was fun. When it dropped down to 33K. I can't remember where I was, out in public. I can't remember where I was. I was walking around and just saw that on Slack and was like, "Oh, okay." It's probably a mistake, but we'll see. My calculations, on the other hand, says that you are at 52,879. That's studio levels. So is Patreon doing something different, or is it just an error? And how is your amount normally calculated? Is it the amounts added together, or is it after the cut to Patreon? So a couple answers to this question. One, that was an error. And two, it's after Patreon's cut. So yeah, if Patreon didn't take any money, we would be above 50K. We technically are. So all of you giving money to us has pushed us over that 50K level. We do not see that 50K because the bigger our Patreon gets, the bigger the slice of pie the Patreon takes out of the chunk, and very rightly deserved. We are very grateful to Patreon for hosting their website and enabling us to do what we do. But yeah, not a ton to say on that. Hopefully those are direct answers to your questions. Lost Rob, I know there has been a lot of asking for and talking about having guest interviews, and I fully understand why you don't want to have them in your home. To this end, I feel that if you set up the interview to be recorded elsewhere, like a public park or beach, a cafe, or their workplace, you could then work through Slack to set up a list of questions and have a couple of the allies go and do the interview, which with your equipment and that interview can be played during the podcast and maybe discussed as well. I'm also aware that this will require a ton of work by the allies. They're scheduling, preparing the questions, filming, and then editing, and that would be, and that's before it could be used during the podcast. However, even if done rarely, it would give us the best of both worlds until that magic day when you move into your studio. It's an interesting idea, Rob. It is a lot of work. And one of the issues that I'm finding in that there's a lot of things that we talk about that it'd be great if we could get to the studio because we could do this. And then a lot of people have ideas where they're like, well, here's a fun middle ground where it's something you could do before the studio, so you can have the best of both worlds. It wouldn't necessarily have to be garage specific, but you could still achieve that goal or still produce that type of content that you want to once you get into a studio. One of the things that I've noticed that's interesting is whenever we stop doing anything, people always ask, where'd that go? You know, even if it didn't really get a big reaction or a positive, we didn't get lots of positive feedback from our community. And so I think, Lost Rob, if we were to do that and then move into the studio and set up interviews in the studio and have like a guest live show that we did or recorded interviews, a lot of our community would be like, oh, I missed those beach interviews. We're like, yeah, but we only did that because you don't have a studio. And they're like, well, I don't like the studio interviews. I liked when you went to the park and did those. And so I don't want to keep introducing stuff and then taking it away. Again, I do not think what you're describing has any place in our schedule right now, aside from maybe doing that like twice a year. I'm not going to rule that out. Like I said, Cory Barlog being on our spoiler mode was very fortuitous, not only in the fact that he was available and in town, but the fact that we wanted to do a spoiler mode and it timed out really well, that all of us had played God of War, but the game hadn't come out yet, and so we were able to produce that before that had happened. And so not only would all of those things have to be fortuitous in that way, but then we would then have to have time and have to get more than one ally involved in a shoot that you would potentially only see one ally in interviewing that person. So that is a legit suggestion, and I will keep that in the back of my mind, Lost Rob, but where I usually give the good call, I'll think about it. I'm not sure if that's gonna happen, Lost Rob, but it's an interesting suggestion. Thank you. I appreciate the suggestion more than anything. Fabian Winkler, I've noticed the upgrade in quality and wondered why all the videos are not in 4K resolution on YouTube. I thought all cameras shoot in 4K now. They do. We talked about that. It just would take up more space, more time. It would make renders longer. It just baby steps, but the setting up the lights and the cameras and everything like that, and getting the switcher operating was our big goal with this new equipment. Actually upgrading everything to be producing shows where you're just watching us sitting at a table in 4K is something that we'll maybe get to. We'll probably have to get to at some point, but we don't necessarily have a roadmap as to when we're going to be producing stuff in 4K right now. But I can understand that's frustrating. We have a lot of technically minded production specialists here in our community at patreon.com/who'stheallies, and I bet it can be kind of, I bet it can suck to not see us do that. And I think that's the one thing is, I think it is the nature of kind of how prolific we are, that we're producing so much stuff, whereas if we had a Patreon, if we were in a group like Filmjoy from Mikey Newman or No Clip, or we were doing things where we did smaller stuff, but then there was like really our big tentpole projects that we did like 4, 5, 6 times a year. Like, this is our big thing. Get ready for this. that's it's really like E3 Easy Living's probably one of those things, but we're just always doing so much that if we were to make all of those things 4K, it would slow down the production process considerably. And considering things got slowed down a lot, like one thing that I'm kind of frustrated by was a lot of this construction came right upon the heels of doing Judges Week, so I went from Judges Week right into construction of this stuff, which went right into pre-E3 planning. Case in point, I have not had a lot of time to get Judges Week stuff done. There are some embargoes that have lifted. There's a fun embargo that lifts today, and I will not have a video ready talking about that fun game that you're going to be hearing news about today. So, there's always something we're not doing. There's always something slowing us down. There's always one extra thing there's always something on my back burner. And that's just 4K right now. 4K is on the back burner. If it was on the front burner, I probably wouldn't even be doing Cup of Jones today if he's still rendering something or working on something. So, baby steps. Alex Pisa, in the past E3, you guys have put a red cloth as a background, as a curtain, which I liked. Would you guys ever try a different background for the main podcast? I'm in no rush for the new studio, but this for something else in the background can make it more unique. Are you guys going to try reflectors for the lights? Reflectors. I'm not sure what you mean. Maybe Ian can speak to that. Maybe tweet at Ian and be like, reflectors? And maybe Ian can respond to that. When you say the word reflectors, I don't know. Like, I'm familiar with, like, bounce cards. When I used to do film, and we would shoot outside, and you didn't necessarily have to bring a light. You just bring a big white cardboard thing and put it right underneath someone's face, and like the light just reflects off of that. So we don't necessarily need a lot of light reflection. We got a lot of lights in here. I think we're good. I just imagine like having reflectors and it just turns into like a J.J. Abrams movie. Like, whoa. But yeah, we will probably be spicing things up now that we have the new camera set up and we have the new background that we've painted and spruced that up a little bit. Our coverage for E3 will look a little bit different than it has before. We're going to be doing tests on that on Thursday and Friday, so hopefully you like the new setup of our E3 coverage, and depending on how that goes, we put a cable in so we can make it easier to have backdrops, and we can make it easier to just bring in a green screen when we need to use it. So maybe we will use that to make shows look different. We'll see. Tiffany Wen, my question to you for this Cup of Jones is that I remember on an Easy Allies podcast, I do not remember which episode it was, Kyle said that he would do the Spider-Man review as his debut of working on a review. I would like to know if that is still happening, or was he just joking about it? Sometimes I cannot tell if Kyle is joking or not. I would love to watch you read a script written by Kyle for the review. I have done this before. I believe it was at Game Trailers. I'm pretty sure. Kyle did the review for Cooking Mama 4. I think he lost a bet, and his bet was to do a review, and it was to review Cooking Mama. So I believe it was Cooking Mama 4. 4 or 5 or something. I was surprised that Cooking Mama had gotten that far. I didn't know Cooking Mama had released that many games. But yeah, go check out Cooking Mama. Kyle is not reviewing Spider-Man. I am reviewing Spider-Man. Thank you very much. So apologies if Cooking Mama 5. Okay. It was a great review, says YouTube. 5 question marks, says Daniel Bloodworth. Cooking Mama 5. All right, chat seems to be pretty much in sync with that one. We love for Kyle to do a review. We're all way in support of that. Kyle just generally feels uncomfortable about the whole. I mean, you talked about how do you make friends with publishers and then score their games. Kyle doesn't. Kyle runs in fear from that prospect, and he only does it when shackled and beaten, or when he loses a bet, or both. But yeah, Kyle reviewed Spider-Man. Spider-Man's interesting. Spider-Man's one of those games. Red Dead, I think, is kind of more of a given because of how obsessed I've made it clear to everybody. Not only am I obsessed with Red Dead, but Rockstar in general. And so I think anytime Rockstar releases a game, I probably got that on lockdown. But Spider-Man was one that, like, I had to tell everybody. I remember, going, to Ben and Huber and, Brad and Damiani and Blood and being like, I'm reviewing Spider-Man, by the way. I'm just making that completely clear. I'm reviewing Spider-Man. And I think about it all the time. I think about that moment of first cracking it open and being like, okay, I hope I have enough time to get that ready by embargo, because that's going to be a big game. And I'm very excited about that. Jacopo Congia. pronounced or Yako as he goes by, and he gave me the pronunciation. Thank you. My question is about naming inconsistencies between various EZA shows. The podcast uses the format Easy Allies Podcast, the number and the date. Frametrap uses Frametrap, episode number, episode name. Friendcode is just Friendcode, episode name, with no episode number whatsoever, and Fiasconauts is just all over the place with numbering and random capitalizations. I know this may sound petty and it could be a pet peeve of mine, but I feel like the channel could look a bit more organized with the standard naming policy throughout all the shows. Dying to see what Daniel Bloodworth says about this, especially adding episode numbers for Friendcode. Blood keeping the playlists organized and up to date is already a huge help. And thank you, Blood, for doing that. Yeah. I think you can chalk this up to just kind of creative freedom right now. It's something that I don't necessarily want to be part of my job to be like wagging my finger. Oh, this one. Different names are actually better for different kinds of content. Oh, okay. So Bloodworth is a fan. I'm not as obsessed with it as maybe I should be because I want each of the allies to have ownership over their shows and be producing that stuff the way that they want to. But yeah, Fiasconauts and Easy Update are never going to have the same naming convention ever because they are produced by Ian Hink. And Ian does what Ian wants when Ian feels like it. And that is the Ian way. But Bloodworth saying, oh, this one, different names are actually better for different kinds of content. I'm going to leave it at that. That is great. But again, also, Yako is like, streamlining is something that I think awaits all of our shows when it comes to logos, general production, lower thirds, thumbs, stuff like that. We've kind of leaned on Bloodworth to help us with that in the past, specifically naming conventions and thumbnails. But it'd be nice to maybe bring in a third party and have them redesign our stuff. That will not be happening soon. Don't quote me on that happening soon. Brandon K, I'm curious what the development process is like when coming up with new shows. Is it an all hands on deck with all the allies, or just the ones that are behind the idea? Is there a medium or hobby or even game genre that you or the allies would like to create content around but haven't? If so, what is it? A medium or hobby? I've always wanted to make a show about safe driving. I'm not even kidding. I've always really wanted to make a YouTube show where I tell everybody, you're nuts, stop driving like this. I've talked about driving and bike safety a little bit here on Cup of Jones, but so yeah, that's been something that I've wanted to do. Hobbies, I don't know. We cover a lot of hobbies. A collecting show might be fun because I do a lot of that stuff, but I'm a big fan of Pennyman, aka Rob Welkner's run of shows because he runs out and buys all that fun stuff when it comes out. Huber Goes Sailing, yes. Great. For instance, a game named first is absolutely better for some content, show names better for others, and episode title headline sometimes better at times. Thank you, Bloodworth. But yeah, usually it takes one producer to get a new show. So in the case of And For That Reason, Kyle came up with that for the podcast, and then we discussed having that be its own show. I don't know if it was Kyle that came up with the idea or another ally, but we did discuss that as a group several times, and at some point the idea came up to make that Patreon exclusive. And then Kyle produced the show with the help of Ian because we knew we needed a certain bits of equipment. We had another camera person come in and shoot it for us, and so sometimes it's really simple that just one person does a show and we sit down and do it. In the case of Friendcode, there wasn't a lot of obviously the graphics and the style of the show was created by Michael Damiani, but then the aesthetics of the show are just us back at this desk talking about stuff. So but yeah, typically it takes one or two people to act as a producer of that show, and then we all just kind of wait for that person to do the work required. Like Trailer Jones. Trailer Jones is my show. I get a lot of feedback from the allies, but I'm still the one that comes up with the trailers that we score, and I'm the one that picks when we're going to record it. Maggie Freyer. I was wondering about the 50K goal and exactly how it would work. It's almost like we answer this question every other week, but I think it is a very important question and one that we're getting towards, so I'm always happy to talk about it, and people always word it slightly differently every time. There have been other goals that have been reached previously, and then the Patreon fell below those goals for whatever reason. Once you acquire a studio, you can't really just say, we're going to have a studio this month because of the amount on Patreon, like you can do right now with recording shows. This is a space to move into that can't be turned over every month based on support. I would love to see a studio, but I just worry about the goal being such a high tier and about its long-term success. A possible solution that I've seen in other communities is that they perform fundraisers to keep their studios open. We've talked about this as well. Is this something you have considered, especially after the success of the fundraiser for the equipment for E3. At the very least, such a fundraiser would give a little money in the bank in case the Patreon fell under the 50K tier. Maggie, I think that was such a well-worded comment and question that I will just say yes. Yes, that is a concern that we would dip below 50K. Some of the allies are much more concerned about that than others. Yes, we have discussed not only having various fundraisers when we were in the studio to possibly help us with new furniture or new equipment. I know we have all this fancy equipment, but there's still a lot of this equipment is built on items that I already had in this garage. And so, we would need to, possibly replace some of that stuff if we were moving out, so that when Easy Allies moves out of this garage, I'm not left with a big empty room. We also, have talked about, certainly that opening weekend, whenever with that first show that we shoot in the Easy Ally studio, that'll be a big party. And I don't know if we'll necessarily frame that party as a fundraiser, but we will always leave the doors open and always suggest to people that hey, we finally made this studio goal thing happen. If you can and you're interested in supporting us even further, just for the cause of keeping us in the studio, we would greatly appreciate that. So yeah, we have all sorts of ideas and also ways to incentivize patrons beyond that 50K goal, because things could operate very differently and look very differently if we were to get a studio, but also it would be very fun to produce even more stuff and have some more carrots dangling on the Patreon for people. 24-hour studio stream, 24 hours. We can do better than that. Warm Feelings. Is there incentive in the distant future to have EZA be a platform for independent creators, similar to Game Trailers? GT partnerships with independent creators were a unique aspect of the site I valued highly. After all, it was through GT that I discovered Game Theory, Hop, Hey Ash, what you playing? Screw Attack, and Mega 64. So, is this a feature that could one day be an addition to EZA, or is the goal to stay focused exclusively on content created in-house by the Nine? Adam Sessler is a guest, is the dream. I can't remember where Warm Feelings put that in, but I wanted to add that. I would love that. I think that would be more of a studio thing. I think it would be fun now that we have a studio space, because we are not shooting stuff all the time. I think it would be fun possibly opening up that studio space for other fun people that are local here in Los Angeles to come in, introduce them to our community, and possibly have them guest star and stream some stuff with us, maybe do shows specifically with them, or give them a platform to introduce them to our community and see what our community takes to and who they dig. As long as there's a clear separation between, who's a member of Easy Allies and who's a member of these other groups. But I know all sorts of fun improv troupes and sketch comedy groups and a lot of really talented people that live here in Los Angeles that I would love to work with. So not making promises, but that is something that I personally would like to do. Adam Sessler's great. Adam Sessler is someone that I'm actually still kind of starstruck around. I've never really gotten the chance to befriend Adam Sessler. I've appeared on podcasts with Adam Sessler in the past, and I have been at events where he's wandered around, and I've been in conversations with groups that he's been there, but I've never really had a time to get to know the Sess, to assess the Sess. And he's a good guy. Kevin Pereira, good guy. Be fun to have on. Morgan Worth, nice lady. Be fun. Good to have her on. Elliot Moscow. Watching Brad on the podcast gave me pause for thought. He's the only core ally to my knowledge who does not have his own show. This may be by choice or availability, as he does his fair share of streaming and may be busy behind the scenes in ways we are not aware of, but watching his style of commentary gave me two ideas for a show that he could do if he was up for it. Brad Rant. Brad comes up with the best Star Wars sign-off rants on the podcast and rants well in general, and I for one find them funny and entertaining and would be up for a weekly gaming movie rant editorial. Rad Brad, often referred to as the Easy Allies OG gamer by other allies, and due to his encyclopedic knowledge of gameplay and skill playing games, I would love to see him take a game or franchise and discuss the pros and cons, ins and outs of the gameplay mechanics and gameplay overall. Fun suggestions, Elliot. Currently Brad does not have a show out of choice. I think that question has come up where we're like, hey Brad, you don't have a show. And Brad's like, I'm fine. So I think he's good for right now. Rad Brad is already a YouTube channel. Rad Brad. That's awesome. Hola, soy Brad. Yeah, Hola, soy Brad was Brad's solo en español show that we wanted to do. I don't think it was Hola, soy Brad. I think it was just Yo soy Brad. I think it was what it was called. And so each episode, it would start dun 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 dun. It would fade in and like, Hola, yo soy Brad. I would love that. I don't know why that's so funny to me. It shouldn't be, but that cracks me up, just watching Brad. Hola, yo soy Brad. So yeah, I'll put it this way: if Brad ever wants to do a show, it's there for him. The slate is clean. He can come in and scribble his notes on there and make a show happen. I remember when I was at GDC before Easy Allies was launched, Sessler came over specifically to ask how I was doing after the GT closure. Oh, says Bloodworth. Thanks, Sess. And Sess is a good guy. Yeah, Sess is one of those people that is very him. When you see Sessler on camera, that's Sessler. That is raw Sessler. Diablo169, given that you already accept and do a showcase for community creativity, how about offering a chance to submit a script for a review? Now, before anyone listening panics, I feel I should put in a few caveats. What I'm suggesting is that we don't tread on yours or any of the other allies' feet. I'm assuming creative control. The don't isn't in there, but I'm assuming that's what he means. Creative control ultimately should rest with you guys. I'd be looking at this as an opportunity to highlight and review titles that you and the other allies would not necessarily have the time to review yourselves, especially given your current packed workload. It could also be made perfectly clear that it's a community-submitted review if a video is produced as a result. Let's face it, there's so many indie titles out there these days that there could be ample space for this to exist as its own thing. You could also set it to a tier at least $50, so only seriously interested parties could apply. I can't wait for Blood to be like, no. I'm just like waiting for but I'm gonna jump ahead of you, Blood. I got it. Don't worry, I got it. 2 reasons why no, hell no. One, us saying give us $50 and then we'll maybe let you give us your editorial opinion is icky. that's kind of gross. No, yeah. Blood's not a fan. So yeah, I'm not a fan for many reasons. 2 prominent ones. One, that's icky to have it, again, like you're giving us money and then you're giving us your opinion and then we're publishing your opinion seemingly from the layman's perspective because you gave us money to give. It's gross. Then again, we do get paid, but this is our job, so we got to eat. He heard me say no, so no. The other thing too, and this is just the nature of the business, and it's the nature of communicating to our audience as much as we can and putting in the effort. Case in point, the question that I got a little bit back from Maggie, who was like, hey, how's the 50K goal going to work? I get that question all the time. And so it's like, even when we say something and blast it out and repeat it ad nauseum, people are still like, what's going on over there? And we're like, didn't you see when we announced it like 5 times? So when you say Diablo, it could be made perfectly clear that it's a community-submitted review. It would not be perfectly clear at all. There are people that do not subscribe to our Patreon, that do not subscribe to our YouTube channel, that just watch our reviews, and that's it. They don't watch our podcast. They don't know our names. They just come by. Oh, another review. I'll watch that. And to that person, even if it said in giant letters, community-submitted review, they would view it as just another review. They'd be like, no, it's an Easy Allies review. Believe me, I have thought about crowdsourcing so much of this job. and there are many, many reasons, some work related, some privacy related, and some just things would have the outward appearance of like, wow, all of a sudden they're just working really hard on reviews. And it's like, no, we have other people writing reviews. You never know who those people would be. I'm not specifically saying how this would go. Obviously, Bloodworth and all the other allies would need to chime in on this, but if we were to expand our writing offerings, I would want it to be a designated person that was now coming in and writing for Easy Allies. So it's like a new person, a new reviewer to come in and be added to the fold, and not just like, oh, let's see if we grab this person's review this month. That sounds kind of sloppy. That sounds kind of confusing to viewers at home, and I think a lot of people would just take that for granted and just be like, oh, another review. Like, oh, Jim Schmo, who's that person? I didn't know that person joined Easy Allies. Well, he didn't. They're just doing reviews for us. Like, oh, are they going to be on the podcast? Like, no, they're just doing reviews. Like, they're going to be on the group stream. Like, no, they're just doing reviews. So, yeah, it would be confusing. Jason Wallstrom left the biggest comment I have ever seen in my life. Like, to rival Cup of Jones, to rival the showcase. I clipped it out as best I could. But so thank you, Jason. If you want to go and read Jason Wallstrom's epic poem that he wrote on last week's Cup of Jones, go for it. But this is the gist of it. I am proposing, drumroll please, the official EZA review crew. Kind of piggybacking on what we said before. Yeah, in the latest stages of game trailers, freelance reviews didn't feel like they made sense anymore, even though we'd been doing them for the better part of a decade, says Daniel Bloodworth. I don't have to tell you that Easy Allies has 9 members. Count them, 9 guys who play video games. It's their job, their livelihood. Just hear me out. I know, well, it's not all 9 of our jobs to review games. Several of us don't. I know that the official Easy Allies review is very important. It's always well written, edited, and voiced by none other than you, the voice Brandon Jones. But I know that EZA is not a hive mind. You guys aren't the Borg. Each of you has your own very own opinions about games. Just ask Ian about The Last Guardian, which EZA awarded the Game of the Year. Ask Kyle about Persona 5. On second thought, don't ask him. I'm not saying you need to get rid of the trademark EZA review that represents the company. The EZA review that appears on YouTube is the official review of Easy Allies, and it always will be. I like to think of it as the cover story and review all rolled up into one, and it shows the industry that you guys are pros. But what I propose is a change to the review section of the EZA website to include number scores from fellow allies. It doesn't have to be all 9 of you for each game, just those that have happened to have played that certain game and have a strong enough opinion to give it a grade, and a quick and short sentence or a paragraph on why they recommend said game or do not recommend it. Again, Wallstrom goes on and on and on to give specific examples of how that would work. Basically, you would go God of War. You would go to the Easy Allies website, and then under the review for God of War, you would also see the different scores from other people. Hogue likes it. I actually would love a counter take whenever an ally feels strongly enough. The thing is, I think you get that. We have Frame Trap where we talk about games. A lot of times the reviewer of said game is not on that episode of Frame Trap, and so it gives Ben and his guests an opportunity to put their opinions out for that game. We have spoiler modes as well sometimes where we get a chance to talk about that. That sits outside of the review. And, you know, we are allowed to spout our opinions on our live streams, and we are allowed to talk about it whenever we meet for group streams and stuff like that. And I don't think there's ever been any hostile, I didn't agree with that score talk. We have definitely had some frustrations about what we give perfect scores or what we give high scores or other things in the past, but we don't necessarily have a public rule that we're like, no, we're not going to do that. And I wouldn't necessarily be opposed to this idea if it was just opinions. Like if it was just like another comment from an ally, or there was a section where maybe somebody else could chime in, especially if it's like a big release, something everybody knows, like we're all really excited about. But the scores are icky. Just the icky. Like us being like, well, here's my score, I think is weird. I think that fuels our community to create division between allies. You know, I think then that puts those allies up, because I think when you're reviewing a game, you think very strongly about the game. Even if someone reviewed a game and then I played it after, I wouldn't necessarily play the game as if I was reviewing it. I wouldn't necessarily do all the ins and outs, and I wouldn't necessarily do all the mini games and try out all the modes and play online a bunch. I might just do single player. I might just do a couple chapters enough to understand it. I might end up spending more time with the game than the person that reviewed it because they reviewed it enough to understand it or played it enough to understand it, and I'm like, no, I am way into this. I'm getting a platinum on this. I'm going to do all the different ins and outs. And so there's so many different variables that come into play when you compare all of our different perspectives and game experiences when it comes to new releases. And so for all of us to just be like throwing scores at the board, and then people get confused, like what's the actual score? And then when somebody brings up later, we're like, I thought that game was okay. And it's like, well, you gave it a 9. And like, well, I didn't give it a 9. I gave it a 9 on the website in that weird little section. I just think we have enough opportunities to have conflicts and disagreements and debates about the quality of certain games and how playable they are and who should check them out. And so actually, giving a numerical, like 7.8 is a joke. That was like a joke that came out of game trailers because for many reasons. And I just don't want those types of numbers to be fuel for more jokes and fuel for more reasons why you should be in a fight with Kyle because Kyle gave that a 7. You know, that kind of stuff. But other opinions, sure. And like quotes, maybe. Like, I don't know. I can maybe be open to that. Not in love with the idea, though. That is a page of comments on Cup of Jones that I am not in love with. But I love that you suggested them. I love that stuff. I love Cup of Jones comments. I don't love Cup of Jones comments that are like 800 words long, but I love Cup of Jones comments that are like, hear me out. I have an idea. Because I get the sense that those people are like, you don't have to do this. It was just some weird idea that I had. And I certainly love discussing it. Jack Goddard, I really love the Q&A, but as I listen with headphones at work, the microphone quality can sometimes hurt my ears due to the either Hangouts auto adjusting for volume or some serious distortion at times. Would you guys be able to get some cheap USB mics that could sit on the desk for each ally? Doesn't have to be amazing, but webcam audio is really hard to listen to. Some from that decent $20 to $40 range, you know? I think we all do. I think Bloodworth was the one that didn't have a great mic, and we just got him a new mic with our new fancy equipment budget. I know I use a USB mic. Brad Ellis was sporting some crazy headset mic last time. I don't know if he like misplaced or his mic got damaged. The piano is too quiet. Yeah, the people said it was too loud last time. They said I wasn't loud enough. I'll up the piano next time. I'm not gonna like goof with piano audio right now. Apologies. It's like so far away. I'm not gonna mess with it. Sorry. Hangout audio stinks no matter what mic you use. There you go. Brad just got a new mic. Piano is good. I love those 3 comments in a row. I do want the piano to be mild. I don't want the piano to be really in your face. But I love the triple comment from Blood. Hangouts audio stinks no matter what mic you use. Brad just got a new mic. Piano is good. There you go. Moving on. Next question. Beaten Down Brian. Not even sure if this is a personal or business question, but basically I wanted to ask if the group ever felt pressured to react to stuff during E3 nowadays. Great question, Brian. I mean, sure, Huber losing his mind for Shenmue 3, as well as the reactions to the others, to the Final Fantasy VII remake back at GT were great, but I feel as if they were great because it was just so unexpected, and it was 3 dudes that just couldn't help themselves in the moment. However, even after that, it seemed like a lot of people were tuning in simply for reactions. I'll often see people talking about things like how they want the allies on the bigger screen with the conference in a small window because they want to see the reactions. For me, the whole reason I like watching E3 with you all is because of the commentary and analysis that you provide over them. I guess maybe I just don't fully understand the love people seem to have for reaction videos. And sometimes I wonder if that love and that expectation leaves you feeling like you have to react to stuff. Just personally, I'd hate for that to be the case, as honestly, I feel like when people are pressured for this type of thing, it usually ends up being a worse overall viewing experience. Well, hopefully, watching us cover videos, Brian, has not been a worse overall experience. And if it hasn't, then that hopefully answers your question, that it's not really a big deal. I remember thinking about that the first E3, the first E3 of Easy Allies. The first E3 we did after the fact, we were like, okay, here we go, time for this new crazy thing. And then thinking like, yeah, are we going to have a Shenmue moment? Are we going to have a clickable moment? Like, we are aware of that. Like, whenever we do an event after the fact, we think about like, yeah, is anything cut outable of that? Did we do anything that was like big enough that would warrant being its own thing? And sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. You know, sometimes we do streams where we're like, yeah, that was not very exciting. That was not clippable. But then other times just it happens, you know, and, case in point, when that first E3, when we gathered together and I was like, you know, are we going to have those moments? Is there going to be something else happening? Resident Evil 7 gets dropped. And so, that legitimately we were freaking out of. So that was a legitimate reaction. That wasn't like, okay, when the big thing happens, everybody get excited. That was us getting excited because we were excited. So, I think I was a little nervous before E3 in 2016. Not nervous now. VG Junkie, E3 coverage promo on YouTube. E3 coverage promo video on YouTube with the stream schedule. Yes, possibly tonight, most likely tomorrow. As I mentioned before. Oh boy, Ben Ramirez with a massive question, and then we will get into personal feedback. Here we go. Ben Ramirez, you mentioned that once the 50k goal is reached, you and the allies will do a fundraiser and stream 24/7 to make sure the 50k goal is to continue is continued to be reached each month. In my opinion, this is the wrong approach because this is fixing the problem once it shows up instead of preventing it from happening. If you reach the 50K goal, you will be able to search for the studio, but you will be limited to finding a studio with the money that you have available. And I know that you will do the best, you will search for the best location possible, but still, it'll be the best location with the money available. I think it's better to find the location that you need first. That's why a fundraiser outside of Patreon makes more sense. The reason why I think it is better is because the 50K goal to be reached, we need around 4,000 to 5,000 patrons to add an extra $1 a month, but this means that it'll add an extra $12 a year for each patron. And EZA is worth it, but not everybody has the budget. If you do a fundraiser, we can get 25K if 5,000 patrons donate $5. This will be $7 less a year than if we do it on Patreon, and even if you need to do a fundraiser again in the same year, this will mean $10 that it'll be $2 less if we use Patreon. Did you get all that? I'm not sure I did. The reason why I said twice is because you can do a fundraiser every 6 months to keep the studio. And I'm only taking in consideration a set amount of patrons, but there are a lot of people from this community that are not patrons because they are unable to do a monthly commitment, but they are willing to do a one-time donation. You will be able to search for 2 or 3 locations that has everything you need, pick the best one for all the allies, and the goal can be the deposit of the location plus 6, 9, or 12 months of rent. The best part is you'll have the money set aside for any emergency, and the salary that you and the allies receive will not be touched. Please keep this option available because just like there are a lot of people from this community that want you to have your own studio because of the many possibilities that the studio represents: collaboration, multiple ally streams, etc. Yes, I think there's good stuff in there. Most specifically, do stuff in preparation. Don't just get to the 50K goal and go, uh-oh, time to hopefully make some more money so we can keep this. The thing you got to remember, though, is we can't just like pick a studio, have the fundraiser, and then be like, all right, time to move in. Somebody might take the studio, when Amanda and I were looking for a house when we first got this place, like houses were snatched up from under us. We were like, hey, this is great. And then the owners were like, yeah, this is great. We want to sell our house to you. And we were like, awesome. And then the next day they were like, nope. We're like, but you said yesterday that it was going to work out. And we didn't sign anything, so they had every right to, but it was just like, real estate in LA is tricky. So that is not, if we were to go out today and find a spot and be like, this is our perfect spot, we wouldn't want to get too emotionally invested in it because anything could happen. It could be given to somebody else. The price could go up. It could be unavailable anymore. The person could decide, no, I don't want to rent this out anymore. No, I don't want to sell this to people anymore. So, glad I took a drink before I read that one. Yeah, I'm a little parched. And we have 15 pages of questions. We have several pages of personal feedback to get through. But we talked about the studio and what we can do, so I feel that we kind of touched on that as well. But thank you very much, Ben Ramirez, for that very, very specific fundraising. And it's nice to hear positive reactions from people following our big fundraiser that are down for us to do another one. And I will take your comment into consideration if, say, we grow to like 47K and then 48K and then just kind of plateau. If we hit that point, we're like, all right, we just need that extra push over the cliff. Let's do a big fundraiser and then possibly use that to get our studio. I definitely don't want people to raise pledges to push for a studio. We just need to get enough new people on board, which is arguably harder work. Correct. I would even love if someday we got enough people that others could lower their pledges without worrying. Correct. Thank you, Bloodworth. Personal feedback. Let's take a nice long break so I can tell when personal feedback starts. Cheers, everybody. Here we go. Professor Metal Gear, is there one particular thing you do every year in preparation for E3? Something to relax you or to get you mentally ready days before the event? If not, do you have something you do once E3 is over? A palate cleanser of sorts after all the madness is over? No. Sorry, Professor Metal Gear, I got nothing. I work a lot and then sleep. Before I work a lot, before E3, and then once E3 is over, I cleanse the palate of not sleeping with sleeping. Villy Ranto, any interest in the World Cup? It starts on June 14th, a month full of games. I'd like to use this platform and encourage people to go to the Easy Allies forums. I made a thread for the World Cup there, and there are instructions on how to join an EZA league. You see, FIFA has this bracket challenge on their site where people can go make their predictions on how they think the tournament will go. I made a league for us Easy A fans. There's a code and instructions in the thread on how to participate. It adds a little competition to the mix, and it's just generally good fun. I love hearing news from the World Cup. I am not generally a sports guy. I like going to baseball games here in Los Angeles. I do not follow baseball very closely every year. I certainly didn't follow baseball for a while because the Dodgers were not doing very well, but they're doing much better now. I have friends that are very much into football. And so it's fun to experience that through them. And whenever I hang out with them to get a little update on how things are going. Whenever somebody mentions the World Cup, I go fondly back in time, to the early 2000s when I was living with roommates when I just graduated from college and I moved into an apartment in Culver City and I was living with a fun group of roommates, and my buddy Clarence was way into the World Cup, and he would wake us up at 4 a.m. and we would get up and watch the World Cup. That was fun. It's not something I would do now because it's just fun to do with friends. I've always been really fascinated, especially in my youth, how I would be really, really into something just because someone else was into it. I've always been kind of a chameleon or like an amoeba that way, where I just like latch onto things and then change my color to fit their style, and then just kind of like try to be empathetic and try to get in their heads and really see like the benefits of something. So that's why I always tried not to write off a style of music or a type of show or something, because I know there's a lot of people out there that really like it, and probably for very good reasons. So on June 14th, I will be at E3, and on June 15th, I will be sleeping or at Disneyland. So I will probably miss the World Cup this year, but thank you for setting that up in the forums. That sounds really fun. Matt Kurlowski, have you seen Solo yet? I have not. If so, what'd you think of it? I haven't seen it. I won't see anything spoilery here, but as someone who did not like Last Jedi, I thought the movie was great. The movie had lots of interesting references to the rest of the Star Wars universe and did some great world building. I feel like there's a lot to discuss about ways it ties into the OT. Maybe you guys could do spoiler mode on it. We probably will not, because when looking in the future, we talked about this yesterday. If we do a movie spoiler mode, I think it's best to plan it done ahead of time and then do it right away. Like literally come from the movie screening and then record that either that night or the next day so we can get that up right away. So yeah, probably not one on Solo, but there were a couple spoiler modes that we planned, and I believe our spoiler mode that will be exclusive to patreon.com/easyallies for the month of June will be Detroit Become Human, with Mr. Michael Huber and Daniel Bloodworth, and possibly other people if they manage to finish that game before we shoot that. Alex Castellanos, I just wanted to chime in on your Emily Blunt Mary Poppins Returns rant with some info you may have locked away in your brain to never return, LOL. You say you can't remember this happening before, but what about Superman Returns with Brandon Routh? It was my understanding that the movie was basically just recast everyone and pretended that nothing ever happened to the original actors. What say you, Jones? It's also weird. That was also very strange. And people said it was strange. A lot of people didn't like that. The public sentiment around Superman Returns was, But Mary Poppins Returns is, So that's the weird, it's that disconnect. That's strange to me. I think that might be Disney. I think comic book fans are more discerning, so comic book fans are like, what are you doing? And Disney fans are like, more! Just the general Disney community is just like, I don't care, there's more stuff. The Broadway version of that movie, yeah! It's hard to not have Disney fans be excited about something that Disney does. But yeah, that was weird. Not only was Superman Returns weird because they recast everything, but they retconned Superman 3 and 4. So I believe it was technically a sequel to Superman 2, which is weird. Everybody's talking about Detroit Become Human now. Kola Aina. I don't know anything about Dawn, but for some reason he's won the hearts of all the allies. Can you give us some Dawn hype? Sure. One of the things that I like about Dawn, and one of the things that's fascinating about Dawn, is a lot of us have, I think, changed our work ethic, changed our personality a bit, changed how we approach doing stuff at... I love how everybody's talking about... Oh, here we go. Now they're talking about this stuff. Maybe it just might have been the delay. But I love it. Everyone was talking about Detroit Become Human because they're like, oh, it's just talking about Mary Poppins again? Okay, anyway. Have any of you guys played any cool video games lately? Chat just left me for a second. like one thing for me that was fascinating was about Easy Allies was that's very different from when we produced stuff at Game Trailers was transparency. What we're doing now. I did not do this type of show at Game Trailers, and so it's fun to talk with all of you. It's fun to answer questions, talk about personal stuff, address business concerns, and talk more about the process and have more of the production of Easy Allies compared to Game Trailers be visible to our audience, because our audience is much more involved in Easy Allies than they were Game Trailers. But Don is just an artist. Don comes in Easy Allies and he's like, I don't need to be on the Q&A. I'm not going to be reviewing games. I'm going to be cutting some stuff. And so that's why it's such a joy when Don shows up and is like, hey, I did a design lab, or hey, I did a, busted trifecta. What can we put this on the channel? We're like, yes, Don. Whoa, what is this? And so I don't want. I have lots of ideas. I think one of the main differences between Don and the other allies is I have a lot of ideas when it comes to other allies. I have ideas about projects that they're working on. I have opinions about that stuff. I want to help people creatively reach their goals, and I want to possibly suggest some things for them to work on, or suggest some ways to better improve their output and their process. And I don't want to touch Don. Don's immaculate. I don't know what it is about Don. He's just very special in his interests and his desires, and his probably very smart attitude of keeping Easy Allies at arm's length and just kind of being like, yeah, I'll be here and I'll be around, but I might not be involved in everything that Easy Allies does. I think that's smart. Don also works very hard. Don is one of the few of us that has a full-time job elsewhere. And so that is also probably very smart. Don's doing well. I love Don. I also just love Don's personality. Don is very grateful, very thankful. Every single time I message Don about anything in Slack, he always is like, thank you. Whenever I let him know he's got VO and stuff like that. Sometimes people, all I need is a thumbs up to let you know you got the VO, but he's always very generous with his time. Always has a great attitude whenever we're working on stuff. I believe I've only seen him get frustrated like twice. Don's just a great person. Jordan Elder, what is the oldest video game you've played? It's probably not your first game, and Pong is not an answer. Pong is not an answer? Why is Pong not an answer? It's weird, but fine, Jordan, fine. Many classic games still hold up in their original formats, though many of us do not play what is not on our latest consoles. The allies will often refer back to the SNES or PlayStation, but is there a single game or series from before those generations that you would think about revisiting, or would even like to see remade in this unbelievable 2018 landscape? All right, Jordan, we got a lot of questions here. What is the oldest video game you've played? Anything from the catalog of the Atari 2600. That was my first video game console. And so Pitfall was the first home console game I ever played. Was at a Christmas party. I went into a side guest room, and there were a bunch of kids huddled around the Atari 2600, and I played Pitfall for the first time, and I was in love. So yeah, it's like, I know some people go all the way back to the PlayStation 1. It's like, PlayStation 1, that was high school, man. PlayStation 1 was my prime. There might be some arcade games that I played in the 80s, like Ms. Pac-Man might technically be older than the Atari 2600, like the tabletop arcade version of that. The answer is Pong. But also depends. There are newer versions of Pong. There is that original arcade version of Pong that you can play. So, I don't know if I've ever played that device before. So it's probably the Atari 2600. But, gosh, I don't know, man. That's such a big question. Any series before these generations that you would love to think about revisiting, or would even like to see remade in this unbelievable 2018 landscape? Yeah, you know what comes to mind? I would love a new Earthworm Jim. I think about Earthworm Jim every now and then. I think that would be so crazy if Earthworm Jim came back. Just a crazy third-person comedy shooter. I think there's not a lot of those. But that's SNES Genesis era. So yeah, maybe, Pitfall's kind of Uncharted now. It'd be kind of silly for Pitfall to come back because Asteroids Missile Command, great suggestions from chat. Star Control 2. Blasto. Yeah, Blasto. That was PS1 though. So yeah, Missile Command. There we go. That's my hot take. Load Runner. I also played a bunch of games on the Apple IIe, and I wonder if that predated the Nintendo 64. Load Runner was one of them. I played the Hobbit adventure game. That was very fun. Played a game with the Muppets where you're on a cruise ship. I remember that from the early days of the Apple IIe. King's Quest, but I think King's Quest was after Atari. Might not have been, though. Christopher Fields, what's one of your favorite games of all time that you've never played? We had this question similarly last week. The thought came across me while Kyle was doing a stream of For the Frog, The Bell Tolls. I fell in love with the game, and yet I'll probably never play it in my life, especially for someone in the strange circumstance of growing up in the era of Let's Plays and Twitch streams. If there was a game I couldn't play due to money restrictions or not having the right platform, I could easily sit down and watch it. Is there any scenario like that for you? Are there any games you've seen streams or watched one of your friends play over the years that you've been enamored by despite having limited experience playing it? Yeah, I like the concept of card games. I'm just terrible at them, and so I'm vicariously enjoying Hearthstone through Amanda because she plays that every single morning and every single night, and I enjoy Ben checking out various card games. I enjoy fighting games through other people. I'm terrible at fighting games. I enjoy watching other people play Overwatch. I do not play Overwatch. We talked about this last week, so it's interesting that I got like boom the next question again. But MMOs was another one that came up as well. I enjoy watching people play World of Warcraft and Final Fantasy XIV, and will likely never play those games again, unfortunately, because there's no time. 60k goal. Jones doesn't do any more work and just plays Final Fantasy XIV all day. Would you kindly? I feel like you enjoy a good story shooter from time to time, so I wonder what your thoughts on Witchfire are. Remember Witchfire? I didn't. I forgot about that game. It was definitely one of my favorite trailers last year, especially with the misleading genre opening that had the line, by the creators of The Vanishing of Ethan Carter. I feel the fantasy shooter, and then it said later, like, and we also made, did they make Bulletstorm? They made something else. So it seemed like, oh, kind of like a walking simulator again, just like an adventure game where you're just walking around. And so they're like, no, it's a big crazy shooter. Word Munchers from Bloodworth. Word Munchers. Nice. I feel the fantasy shooter aspect is quite unique. Is there a spot for this game on the EZA hype train? P.S. If I remember correctly, you had some love for Bulletstorm by the same studio, the Astronauts. Yeah, I think I checked out Bulletstorm for 5 seconds. I believe Huber was a big fan of Bulletstorm. I believe he was talking about the remaster when they released that. Yeah, I'm curious about Witchfire. Witchfire seems to me to... God, there's some game like Killstorm or something that was on the PC that was like a very similar vibe where like you were in hell and things were... People can fly. Yeah, I don't remember the Astronauts for Bulletstorm. I don't think he means Bulletstorm. I think he got confused. I think there's another game that the Astronauts made. What's the game I'm thinking of? It was like not Killing Storm or Killing Floor, not Killing Floor. It was like there were lots of big like Painkiller. There it is. Painkiller. Yes. I played a lot of Painkiller back in the day. I really enjoyed that. And that was kind of fun and spooky in its own right because stuff was just it's like Serious Sam where stuff's just constantly running right at you. And so GOG is a big summer sale going on. Nice. Hexen. Okay. People can fly as a Bulletstorm studio. Yes, the Astronauts are some of the lead devs that moved away. Got it. Thank you, Blood. I liked Painkiller, so I might be interested in checking that stuff out. I don't play a lot of shooters on PC. I like my shooters with my controller. I like having my thumb. I like thumbs being responsible for my movement in a shooter. If you try using a mouse with your thumb, it's problematic. I'd say there's some room for hype. I imagine that seems like a Huber joint that he'd be excited about that, but I will try to bring that up when we have our pre-show discussions about what to expect from E3, because that was definitely a fun announcement. Sean Dupree, I'm currently embarking on a years-long quest to play all the numbered Final Fantasy games with a friend. We are currently in the middle of Final Fantasy VI, right at the point of the big world change, and I have to say, we are underwhelmed. I realize this is your favorite Final Fantasy game, and I just wonder, have you played 5? I have played 5. Am I missing a core mechanic? I don't know. I don't know what core mechanics you're expecting. That's kind of a big question. Can you tell me your favorite character? My favorite character at the time was probably Locke. My favorite character now is probably Terra because she's just fascinating. She's probably my favorite Final Fantasy protagonist. because I think it's a very fine line in every Final Fantasy game when you write a character that's like, I don't know what to do. And like those characters can sometimes, like, I started 6 and I was like, oh, Terra, I'll help you. Let's go. You know, these people were so mean to you, Terra. Like, let's go exact revenge on the people that wronged you, and let's go make the right friends, and we'll get an army together, and we'll right all of the wrongs with this world. And then I started Final Fantasy VII, and Cloud was like, I don't know what to do. And I was like, oh, shut up, Cloud. And it's like, it's a real fine line as far as like your patience with protagonists, you know, being insufferable and confused and unmotivated and needing other characters to come in and kind of be like, come on, main character, let's do this. So yeah, those are probably my two. Celes is also up there. I think Locke and Celes is probably my favorite relationship. And I think 6 has too many characters. Nay, I disagree. Because a lot of those characters are optional. But I really like the peaks and valleys of the relationship between Locke and Celes, and moments where they are torn apart and then brought back together. That was very new to me when I first played Final Fantasy VI. I had never played a game that had character relationships like that. No, Chrono Cross has too many characters. Ooh, blood's getting spicy. Sean, you have every right not to like Final Fantasy VI. You be you. If that game doesn't do it for you, then fine. You know, that's cool that you're playing all of them. And I'm curious when all is said and done, how Final Fantasy VI will rest among all those other stories. I think Final Fantasy VI is, if you're talking about mechanics, I just think it's an absolutely tremendous game for the time. I think it's the best RPG that was released on the Super Nintendo. Yes, I liked it better than Chrono Trigger. I think the story is just very adult. I think it deals with a lot of adult themes. Maybe I wonder how you'd be interested once you get past the world change that you speak of, and you get into kind of reuniting and reinvigorating some people in your party to do other things. If you might find some of their own individual stories interesting, and if those might stick out. But I'd be curious to continue this conversation, Sean. Let me know other things you don't like about that game. We'll talk about it. Alec Church, what's your familiarity with music theory? Can you read sheet music? Do you play any instruments? I used to play piano. I can still fake piano. And so when I was writing the jingle for Trailer Jones, I actually like wrote that and sent that to Ian, who was like, I kind of wanted to do this, you know. And when I did both of my performances at this year's concert and last year's concert, where I had a piano accompanist, fun word. I worked with Jonathan Green, my accompanist, and talked about potentially what we could do with octave changes and notes and stuff like that, and we kind of bounced back and forth. So when I understand it when I'm working with someone with music, but like I do not play piano. Amanda does. I cannot just sit down and like, oh, give me sheet music, woo. But like I did do a lot of musical theater, and so from my experience with that, I have become familiar with sheet music. I couldn't, if you just like gave me a note on sheet music, I couldn't sing that note, but if you played that note, I could potentially sing the rest of the song. So I have a familiarity is a good word. I have a familiarity with music theory, and almost did it for school. I was very close to getting into learning more about that, and then decided to get into video production. Kyle Lee, what's your favorite reveal from past E3s? What gave you the Huber Shenmue 3 excitement? This sounds like an easy answer, but honestly, Shenmue 3. Because that kind of changed, not everything, but that changed a lot when it came to my perception of our jobs, my perception of our community, my perception of Huber, what we could really bring, what we could bring as far as uniqueness was concerned. Like, I think before that moment, I really viewed game trailers as being second fiddle to an IGN, to a Games Radar, to a Game Informer, you know, like us constantly trying to fight to become relevant in that space and be like, we don't necessarily have our own editorial voice. We do reviews a little bit differently, but like, we're just another group like all these other groups that talks about video games. And when I saw Huber freaking out like that, and when I saw our community freaking out about Huber freaking out, I realized not that we were going to be like the freak out people, but that, you know, that in being genuine and being who we are to our community, and giving our community the power to be who they were, it was a good place to start as far as finding our own identity. And then, sure enough, a couple months later, we were out on our own and then forged our own thing. And yeah, I didn't think that was possible at all. And so you see that it's like when Huber throws the headphones off, when Huber's like, and really just that whole press conference. Final Fantasy VII Remake also was nuts. And just the word remake, hitting was really, really great. The stuff that I'm really into, the announcements that I wait for, are for franchises that I was excited about Resident Evil 7, but I knew that series was coming back. I like Rockstar. I'm anticipating Grand Theft Auto 6, but I know it's going to happen. So I wouldn't be like, what? If that got announced. So I'm not the kind of person. Whenever we get those big reveals, those aren't for me. Those are for your whatever the heck Shadows Die Twice is, and whenever we get our first glance of Resident Evil 2, the stuff I'm excited for just kind of tends to happen. Because I have realistic expectations that way. I don't dream up crazy goals like Huber does. And then somehow manifest them. Alex Pisa, which ex-GT members did you learn the most from? It's a very good question. I learned a lot from Shane Satterfield because he built the editorial method that we use today. I was the one who designed our reviews. I cut our first review and I voiced our second review and at Game Trailers, and so I was responsible for what our reviews were like. But Shane came in and was like, "Hey, we need to have an editorial team, meaning these are the people that write the reviews, and we need to have a team of editors, video editors. These are the people that cut the reviews, and they got to be separate." And I was like, "Oh yeah, good idea," because at the time we just hired editors. We were all film majors and production people, and so we hired more production people to help us with Game Trailers, and so he really changed that. So I will always be grateful to Shane for that. I consider Jeff Keighley technically an ex-GT member. He was directly employed at Game Trailers for a while, and so I've learned a ton, not only from Keighley, but Keighley would do his E3 coverage, and then I would work on that, and I would learn so much about television production and just the pipeline of working on a big stage with all of those moving parts. But I also got to give a shout out to Ryan Stevens, because Ryan Stevens would always throw out the weirdest games. He would always mention, hey, did you know about this weird PC game? Or, hey, did you know about this guy who worked on this game? He now works at this company. And almost 9 times out of 10, every single time he offered a little factoid about that, I had never heard of it. Not even I always wondered about that. I didn't have that information. What are you talking about? And I would look it up whoa, yeah, I guess that exists. So as far as just weird, just the bottomless pit of weird information, that the award most certainly goes to Ryan Stevens. Tyler Manning, who are you looking forward to running into 83 this year? Everybody. Shane Satterfield, Daniel Kaiser, Keighley. Tyler spells Kaiser and Keighley wrong. Patrick Morales. Do you often see those guys at E3? Not Patrick Morales, but I saw Shane Satterfield and Daniel Kaiser at E3. Keighley is a given. I saw Keighley at Judges Week as well. Do you often see those guys at E3? I remember you ran into Kaiser a year or two ago and posted a pic on Twitter. It was just really nice to see old coworkers or still buddies at all these years later. Yeah, I'm excited for all of that. I'm excited to see Megan Rue. I'm excited to see Rohan Rivas. I'm excited to see Jeremy Hoffman. I'm excited to see anybody and everybody. Yeah, I'm sure they will hopefully all be there. I know Hoffman will be there. Hoffman's planning all sorts of crazy stuff for what Fortnite's going to be doing. And so hopefully I'll have time. I got invited to the Fortnite party. I don't know if I'm going to be able to go to the party. Oh, I should have made a short list. I was thinking about doing that. I should have made a short list of all the press conferences I was going to be at. I missed all of them, almost all of them last year. I think I was around for Nintendo. I will be around for Bethesda this year. I will be around for Ubisoft, and I will also be around for Nintendo and possibly Xbox. I'm still on the fence of whether I'm going to go to the Xbox press conference or not. I will be attending I will be gone for the Sony press conference, and I will be gone for the Electronic Arts press conference. So, unfortunately, when we kick off E3, I will not be here. But you'll be hearing my voice in a video I will be producing before our coverage begins. So, I will be there in spirit, but I will not be there Saturday morning. In Poison. Parasite Paladin, please talk about Fatal Frame. Fatal Frame 2 if you need some direction. I've always had my fingers crossed to hear a good talk about these series from the Allies. Also, do you feel Fatal Frame being partially owned by Nintendo has helped or hurt the series? Yeah, you don't hear a lot of Fatal Frame talk right now. Will I be there for Square Enix? I think so as well. Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that you missed me last year at those pressers. Yeah, Fatal Frame is a franchise that I really like. Would you ever wind up doing anything with the E3 sponsors concept? Yes, we will be having an E3 sponsor. That we're not going to be using the language that our E3 coverage is brought to you by this sponsor, but we will have a special segment during E3 that will be sponsored by someone. So it's not too late, Hogue. If you want to help, if you want to sponsor as well, let me know. But this person just reached out to us and said they want to be an E3 sponsor. Yeah, I don't... Nintendo does all sorts of weird stuff, so I don't know. We haven't heard a lot about Fatal Frame. Obviously, I think there was like a Fatal Frame Switch game. Or no, there has not been a Fatal Frame Switch game. I think there was a Fatal Frame Wii U game that was only in Japan, maybe? Hydrobot. Yeah, Hydrobot will be E3, provided by Patreon. Pretty much, all of you are our E3 sponsors. That's why we don't want to use that language, because you are all bringing E3 to the masses as well. Fatal Frame is a series that I want to love more than I do. It's a concept that I think is so great, and I love the idea. The first time I played Fatal Frame, it absolutely terrified me. I remember a ghost came through a wall, and it wasn't even like a planned event. Like, there's a lot of choreographed scares that happen in Fatal Frame games. This wasn't that. It was like I missed the ghost floating around, and then it just went into one room and then came out through a wall right in front of me, and that sent chills down to my toes. Like, that was probably one of the scariest moments I've ever experienced in a game. I've been around people that have played Crimson Butterfly. I'm familiar with it, but I've not spent a lot of time with Fatal Frame. The thing is, I get diminishing returns with Fatal Frame. Like, when I played Fatal Frame 1, I was like, wow, what an awesome concept. That game was terrifying. And then I played Fatal Frame 2, and I'm like, all right, it's just more Fatal Frame. And then I've checked out other games, Fatal Frame series briefly, and I'm just like, okay, I don't think the series has evolved enough for me to really make time for it. And I think, I don't think the writing is that great. I think the lore is really good in Fatal Frame games, but I don't think the characters are written very well. I don't think they're voice acted very well. I think there is kind of a fakeness, for lack of a better word, when it comes to the character models and comes to their just attitudes and the acting and stuff like that. And so I really need that found footage-esque, that's why I think Outlast intentionally does not have a ton of voice acting, did not have a ton of story. They really just let these kind of raw moments speak for themselves. So yeah, that's a game I would love to return to someday, but it's just something that has Fatal Frame Battle Royale. Says our community. I'd love to return to that series someday, but it's just never been at the front of my anticipation. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention the top of our of this that tonight is the E3 Trailer Hype Fest. So join us, 6 p.m. Pacific Time, twitch.tv/EasyAllies. Diamond Crusader, what games are you looking forward to at E3 2019? The Respawn Star Wars game. I think it's going to come out that year. And Final Fantasy 16, the announcement of Final Fantasy 16, I'm looking forward to. And the reveal of the PlayStation 5. Probably not. Maybe. A lot of the time, well, no, they wouldn't reveal it at E3. They would show the games at E3 and reveal it at another event. So no, strike that one. Jet Eater. A lot of the time, oh boy, we got 3 more pages. Okay, let's hustle. A lot of the time when thinking about what games are the most appealing to me, I think about games having or lacking a soul. I'm not sure what contributes to my perception of a game having a soul or not. Souls games and MGS are 2 of my favorite franchises of all times. Both of these franchises are completely saturated in their own identity and style, and I think that might be what I perceive as soul. Have you thought about games in this way? If so, what do you believe might contribute to this? Would you take an idea so nebulous as this into account when reviewing a game, or do you stick to what you can see, hear, and touch? Yeah, sometimes maybe when reviewing a game, a soul can describe something that we can't find another word for otherwise, or maybe when we're saying this game makes us feel certain ways or brings us to a certain emotional level, that could potentially be the soul. Hot take. I actually think the Souls games are lacking soul. Badum ching. Part of my problem with the Souls games is that when you meet characters, they're just kind of like, hey, I'm standing here at the helmet. And you've heard me complain about lip sync and stuff like that. Like, I get the impression of the story that Souls games put forward, but I don't feel like I'm there. Like, I don't feel when it's like, this used to be a kingdom. I'm like, all right. I feel this is like the set that the story you're telling is being put on, but like, I don't believe people lived here. Like, I don't, it's like Bloodborne's a dream. It's like, how convenient. So like, no, I don't have to take any of this seriously. Like, I do feel a disconnect with the Souls games, not to rag on them because they're amazing, but like, that is one thing that I think has prohibited me from getting as invested. The style of Bloodborne I loved so much, and that game is just beautiful, beautiful. And so I think that's why I really got into that, and not necessarily. And once the story is taken on its own, once we sit down and you just tell me the story and tell me what happens, that sounds awesome, and that's a really great story. And wow, it really sucks for that character that all those things turned out that way. But when I'm actually in the game itself, like, I don't really care. It's like I just, the way the game presents its story doesn't hit me. Like, me talking through a window at someone in Bloodborne, like, okay, I'm just not, like, I'm sure that person's there in that room, in that window that I can't see through. Like, it just, I don't feel connected. And so I think when I think about Soul, I think about that connectivity. I think Life is Strange definitely has a soul. I definitely feel a passion and a love for those characters. If a game ever makes me cry, that game's got a soul, because I really feel Last of Us definitely has a soul. Like, I definitely feel connected to these people, and I care for them and want to not only like finish this video game, but I want to get these characters to where they want to go. And when I cross that line of I didn't feel that when I played Far Cry 5. I very much enjoyed building up my character, but when it came to interacting with other characters in Far Cry 5, huge disconnect. And so I think when I actually finally cross those tracks and get to the other side and think like, wow, I'm emotionally invested in this on a whole different level, that to me is a soul. But yeah, there's a little hot take. Yeah, again, people are bringing up all these examples of like, but what about this character from Souls? It's a very tragic story. And like, it is on paper. Like, it's just when I actually am in the game, I'm like, this is a fun video game. I'm not actually like, oh my God, that person died. Kuko Kukonen, you briefly mentioned 2 weeks ago in Cup of Jones that you don't have kids outside of your pets. You're not the youngest seedling in the field anymore. So I'm just asking for Brandon Jones's official stance on real kids. Think about all the possibilities you could do with Easy A Babies branding. All joking aside, you don't have to answer this if you feel it's too personal. It could potentially be. I'm not going to get too specific about it. I'm not opposed to having kids. I'm not in favor of having kids. Amanda and I, through our entire relationship, have been totally on the fence. This is the fence, and this is us. Many reasons to do it, many reasons not to do it. We're both very focused on our career. So, I don't know. David Purcell, I heard you mention your friendship with Colin Moriarty, so I figured I'd ask. Brewing in Southern California, get ready for another quick answer. Brewing in Southern California right now is a movement often referred to as the intellectual dark web, which Colin M. is a part of, along with many others, including Joe Rogan, Eric Weinstein, Christina Hoff Sommers. I do not know Eric Weinstein or Christina Hoff Sommers. Those are new on me. Dave Rubin. I know Dave Rubin, etc. I know you have expressed pro-politically correct sentiments like vote in the past, and I was curious how your views contrast with the discussions being had in the IDW. I don't know. That's the answer, David. I legitimately don't know. I know I'm familiar with Dave Rubin. I've never listened to a show that he's been on. I don't know. If you want to bring up a specific topic, maybe we can get into that. Maybe I can make an editorial out of it, but I legitimately do not know. I have not followed their stuff. I get along with Colin. I have not listened to a lot of his shows that he's produced. He's done a lot of interesting topics. He's had a lot of interesting guests on. Tips to Colin for going full on with the guest route. He definitely, I envy him when it comes to the outreach that he does to bring in a lot of guests and have a lot of varied perspectives. I tend to like see headlines from him and I'm like, whoa, you had who on your show? I bet that was an interesting conversation. But don't know. Not going to get into details on that because I don't know. Tony Sakamono, during podcast 114, when you guys were talking about Pokemon Quest, You mentioned how when you get hooked on mobile games, you are pleased when there is an option to just watch the characters do something, a la auto battle, and not necessarily play all the time. I feel very much the same way, and none of my friends seem to understand, as I am the only one in my circle that plays mobile games. What do you think makes these auto features so appealing to avid mobile players like ourselves? Dear. I think the thing is, a lot of people look down on mobile games because they're like, that's not as good as my console experience. And it's like, well, yeah, of course. I don't play mobile games because I want that console experience. You know, it's like if I'm exporting something on through Premiere, I'm not going to be like, all right, PlayStation 4, turn it on. Let's do it. Pop in that game, Fortnite. Let's do a match. Like, it's like I literally have 5 minutes right now. And the actual act of like booting up a console and getting all that stuff ready, logging in, booting up the game, waiting for it to load, getting into a match. Or I could literally just whoop, Galaxy of Heroes. And so it's just nice to have something be that easy. And I think when you describe it that way and you say, yeah, this experience doesn't have a lot to it, it's just a really easy experience, people are like, how boring? And you're like, well, yeah, but it's built for boring situations. So I'm assuming those people who aren't into mobile games, whenever they are in those situations, when they're at a restaurant and their friend went to the bathroom, or whether they're at the post office, or whether they're at the market, or at the bank, or they're waiting to get a haircut, or whatever, you know, like you find themselves in situations where you're like, oh, I'm just standing here. Case in point, E3. You might be going to E3 soon, or going to a convention and find yourself waiting in lines a lot. I'm assuming you spend that entire time on Facebook. Basically, Facebook and Twitter or Instagram. Like, that is how you spend time on your phone. Not a big Facebook fan. Facebook just seems like a huge time investment. I used to spend a lot of time on Facebook. I don't so much anymore. Have not gotten into the whole Instagram craze. I do have an Instagram account. I might get obsessed with that at some point. I do like Twitter a lot. I spend a lot of time on Twitter. But I run out of Twitter. I'm like, all right, that's it. I'm all caught up. You know, I've caught up with people that have messaged me and replied to me, and I'm caught up on all the other posts that my friends have made. And so I want to play some mobile games. And I think mobile games tend to experiment or do genres better than other people do. I kind of like PC games when you have a mouse and keyboard. I like mobile games when it comes to, like, when I played Pokemon Quest, I was like, I ain't playing this on consoles, I'm playing this on mobile, because they're like, click this piece of equipment and drag it over to this equipment slot. And it's like, I don't want to do that on a console. I'll do that on my phone, or I just whoop, like, you know, match it over. So I think for me, the reason why I like the automation, why I like just watching something unfold, is why I like tower defense also, because it's fun to like build up towers and then just watch it. Just watch this just kind of machine of destruction just dismantle all of these forces that are trying to take over your base. And I do also like the social aspect. I like getting into clans and stuff like that. I played Clash of Clans for a very brief time, but was in a very professional guild and like loved how serious that guild was, and seeing them in action, and actually watching their matches and seeing them, you know, battle other people, seeing basically some of the best players of Clash of Clans do their thing. And so, yeah, it's a little bit of that social, but I think it's a lot of just the relaxedness of it. I like to have various tiers of my gaming experience. You know, there's some times where I turn the lights off, I put my headphones on, and I really sink myself into a game. There are other times where I'll just play something casually, whether I've played it before, or it's just like Fortnite, or it's like a multiplayer game, or something where I'm like, all right, there's not a lot of story coming at me right now, but this is something that I'm going to play for the next 2 or 3 hours. And then the lowest tier, which is I am just relaxing right now. And that to me is mobile. And so I think when you describe that kind of a relaxed situation to people who primarily play PC and console games, that seems very odd to them, because they're like, how can you be relaxed when you play games? Gaming is the most strenuous, frustrating, you know, or stressful, you know, blood pumping experience. And like, for me, it doesn't always have to be blood pumping. To me, you can play a game and just kind of be like, and sometimes I do that. Victor Coe. But it's good to have a friend out there. Fist bump in the mobile world. I just listened to the Q&A for May, and I have an idea to figure out who leaves the garage messy. I suggest getting a few Sharpies and having everyone mark their own can or drink with their initials. That way, when drinks are moved, people will be able to find their drinks. Also, if no one cleans their drinks, you can figure out whose drink it is. Yeah, I think we start doing that around E3. I think we start labeling cups. I know who it is. I know who the sloppy allies are. And it's not just cups. There are lots of other ways to be messy in this garage. So they're just messy people. There's nothing I can do. Just the way they were raised. I think if we were to one day get a studio, Jones thought you were sleeping in at the start. LOL. No. If we get a studio, it might be a good time for us to have like jobs, because I pretty much take the job of cleaning this place. I'm the one who vacuums. I'm the one who picks up the food. I'm the one who sets the silverware out and orders the food and everything. Like, there's a lot of responsibilities I have because it's my house, and so I just naturally took that stuff on, and I'm happy to do it. But if we get a studio, it's like, this isn't my house anymore. So if none of you clean this stuff up, stuff's just gonna be sitting around, not my responsibility. So it might be fun to like have an activity board where it's like, oh, look at that, it's Damiani's time to clean the kitchen. I look forward to that. Hedgie, I was wondering if you had some thoughts on the big wide world of rhythm gaming. Konami and Sega have been huge in keeping the genre alive with consistent updates and a ton of titles. They use a wide variety of input methods, touchscreens, buttons, touch surfaces, motion, analog dials, but unfortunately this has been limited to the arcade space. While incredibly interesting games like Chunithm have only seen a release in Japan, mainly due to song licenses, there are a few titles such as Sound Voltex, Beatmania 2DX, Museka, Dance Rush, all games from Konami, that have seen release across the United States via Japanese arcade chain Round 1. The newest Dance Dance Revolution, or DDR, somewhat recently saw a release through Round 1, but also through Dave & Buster's, a much larger chain of stores. The world champion of DDR in 2017 was American. As rhythm gaming often isn't covered, I would be curious to get the Allies' opinion. Maybe have a select few go check out the games available at Round 1 and report back via a Frame Trap episode. What are your personal opinions on rhythm games? I used to be really into rhythm games. I used to be really into Guitar Hero and Rock Band. When Rock Band and Guitar Hero came back, I was actually more interested in Guitar Hero because they had like a party mode, and I thought that was really good for parties and gatherings, even though I had parties and like didn't break it out. I got the guitar sitting in the back there in the closet. And so I do have a fascination with music and rhythm games. I played Theater Rhythm. I really liked that, but played a ton of Guitar Hero. Played Guitar Hero Green Day, played Guitar Hero Metallica, played Rock Band Beatles, played Guitar Hero Aerosmith. Like, I played all of that stuff, and really, really liked it. And if those franchises came back, I would give them a shake. But it's not something I need to come back, and I understand why that hasn't really clicked with American audiences. That definitely was its own hot genre for a while, and then people kind of got oversaturated. People were just frustrated having to buy new stuff. They're just like, I got the thing. If you want to release more content, fine, I'll get that. And the developers just weren't making enough money on that extra content, so it was not viable. Was not a big fan of Fantasia, the Fantasia Connect game. That was weird. So love DDR though. That's a game I love that didn't necessarily get involved in. I have had friends over the years that are obsessed with that game, that are very good at it. And we have done some DDR. I think we did some DDR. We brought the pads out and we did some pad DDR here on a live stream at one point. So yeah, I remember whenever I think about music and rhythm games or think about the history of them, I always recall Mike Budde, who we have discussed so far, Mikebudde, Mike Budde. Used to work at GameWorks, which I think is around in like a couple of places in the U.S., but it is an arcade. I think there is a GameWorks still in Seattle, right outside of PAX, right outside of the convention center. And I remember going to GameWorks because Mike Budde worked there, and I was picking him up because he was going to go see a movie or do something else. And I walk into GameWorks, and Mike Budde is playing Guitar Freaks. And I remember coming over and being like, "Whoa, what's this, Mike Budde?" And he was like, "Dude, this is music rhythm game where you like play a guitar, so you gotta like hold down the notes while you strum." And I was like, "This looks really fun." And he was like, "Yeah, if they only had," and he's like, "But it's a bunch of weird music that they made up. Like there's a bunch of songs that are not like popular songs. Like they don't have like the rights to anything that we would actually want to play. You gotta play just all the weird Guitar Freak songs." And I remember him specifically saying, and I quote, "If they had the Red Hot Chili Peppers in this, I would play this game all the time." And so the first time I finally played a Red Hot Chili Peppers song in Guitar Hero, I thought of Mike Budde. Safaki. After hearing the news about the upcoming Pokemon titles, I decided to rewatch the best tribute to a game in the Hall of Fame, or the Hall of Greats, or the Hall of Fame, I don't know. Brandon plays Pokemon. Thank you. That's kind. After watching through the show that you yourself referred to as catching lightning in a bottle, I began to wonder about what the series meant to me, and if there were any questions about it I wanted to ask you. However, due to me watching Brandon Plays Pokemon on YouTube, I was recommended an episode of something called Pokemon Generations, a series of short films between 3 to 5 minutes each. I also still had your unsatisfactory conclusion of Team Rocket and Giovanni. So, if you still feel unsatisfied about that whole debacle, I would recommend watching episode 2 and 5 of Pokemon Generations. And if you are still up for more, I think you would enjoy episode 3 and 10 as well. I love the specific episode recommendations. I will try to remember that, Safaki, if I ever have the desire to go back and watch that stuff. One more question. We're at 2 hours. The boys are coming in an hour to shoot tabletop, so it's time to wrap it up. And we do have a quick editorial from a very long question by Snowcone Guy. Congratulations, Snowcone Guy. I'm doing an editorial based on your question today. I almost missed my first question getting asked last week because you because you pronounced my last name slightly off, and it took my brain a second to realize you said my name. For future reference, my last name is pronounced cuz, like just cuz, Lao, like cow, and ski, like downhill skiing. Kozlowski. Kozlowski. Daniel Kozlowski. There you go. And I do have an actual question. Do you have any tips for recovering from a lost voice? In the past, I think you've said to just talk as little as possible, which I've done over the past 2 days to recover from losing my voice. But do you have any other tips for recovery? Since both you and Amanda rely heavily on your voices for your work, I'm hoping you have some helpful tips. Amanda, you can maybe tweet at Amanda. Amanda has a lot of fun tips for this because I tend to lose my voice just because I talk a lot. But she loses her voice because she talks, she does live shows where she's improvising and screaming, and she does like character voice acting or like animal voice acting, and so she's doing lots of growls and screams and real guttural stuff. But water is great. Drink a ton of water. I think just in general, we got the lovely hydration bot here on or not here, we're on YouTube, but on Twitch. I think a lot of people take for granted how much water you really should be drinking. And so I think not only take water to recover from losing your voice, but if you know you're going to do something that is very strenuous, drink a lot of water while you were doing it. My voice is getting a little scratchy. I don't know why. It might be the lights or something. I don't know why. Tuckupa Jones has made my voice a little scratchy ever since I started doing it in the space, as in last week. And obviously tea. There's all sorts of teas. I don't think there are like bad teas for your voice. Tea is a very nice thing to do. Yeah, and stay hydrated, kids. That's my best take that I can give you. But yeah, I have the one time, if any of you were familiar with previous episodes of Cup of Jones, or if you watched our fundraising stream, you might have seen me perform as P.T. Barnum when I did the musical Barnum my junior year of high school. And it might have been my senior year, I believe it. No, senior year was Guys and Dolls. That was I did Barnum then. But I totally lost my voice when I did Barnum. That was very scary, and I did not have an understudy, so I had to go on as Barnum and be like, and so I remember that being really terrifying, and I don't think I've ever gotten to that point since. So I don't know if I've ever completely lost my voice, but I have been there. Takeaways: improve the sound quality of the Q&A, which Blood said apparently is impossible. Revisit the timing of the Q&As, of when it goes live to people. Basically just make sure that we're doing that the way we want to do that, because that's never something that I have really focused on specifically. And consider doing Patreon posts just for the press conferences. Maybe we'll do that. The only way I consider us possibly doing that, and I'm not making promises here, is maybe like Tuesday when the show starts, maybe later the day on Tuesday, putting up those press conferences, but like day to day, I don't know if we're going to be doing that. One thing that I can say possibly that I just thought of, maybe hang on to Twitter, which sucks because it spoils stuff. But I could see us being like, hey, so the EA press conference was fun this morning. If you missed it, check it out here on Twitter. Maybe just keep our Twitter page open, and we'll try not to spoil too much. All right. Take another quick sip. Switch the editorial section. Boom. Hi, everybody. I'm Brandon Jones. Seventh inning stretch. Oh, my arms are so sore because I started working out with Sean again. Oh, the back door opened. Is Amanda gonna sneak in, or is she just walking around the backyard? Nope. Heard the back door click. But, oh, man. Snowcone Guy. E3 is almost here. I can't wait for it. And like it's a huge post, Snowcone Guy. Just chill, okay? I believe I got a message from Snowcone Guy also. It's like, sorry for the super long post. E3 is almost here. I can't wait for it. And like the last 2 years, I will watch every single one of your live reaction streams because if there is one thing better about E3 and seeing new game announcements as they happen, it is seeing them and hearing and your immediate reactions. Will Huber stand up? Will Ian shout? Will Kyle put up his hoodie and kneel in his chair? Those moments are pure gold to me and the best type of content that is coming out of EZA. With that subjective premise set, let me get to my actual topic. It's the one thing that can spoil this fun or even ruin it. Leaks. E3 leaks. When Nintendo held their January 2017 reveal event for the Nintendo Switch, you guys knew about pretty much every first-party title and their names, as someone posted images of the demo stations on 4chan. When Sony dropped the bomb and showed a trailer for Shadow of the Colossus Remastered, it took less than a second of vague footage for Damiani to shout, "It's Shadow of the Colossus," because he looked up leaks before the stream. For me, the best part of a live reaction is when a vague trailer becomes more clear. You guys get your first suspicions what game it might be, and then someone confirms those suspicions, and you go totally bonkers. And the publishers are even helping us in creating such outstanding moments by designing many of their reveals to start out vague and unclear on purpose. But once you got spoiled by leaks, we get robbed of those moments of authentic and emotional discovery. The process of being clueless, having a suspicion, building up tension, and then bursting with joy when you know the game for sure becomes a simple ticking off games from the leak list. We knew this was coming, 4chan was right. Now I totally understand that you have to look at news and leaks in order to stay up to date and do your job. But I think that the balance between the two extremes of reading leaks and going on media blackout can be improved. So here is what I propose. During the time leading up to E3, you do your job, but keep up with all the news. You do your job and keep up with all the news, even if they might contain E3 spoiling leaks. But you do an oath to not look up any more leaks or spoilers on the day of the press conference. Good luck. Michael Damiani would never, ever agree to that. Or at least starting several hours before the event, because chances are high that someone with a smartphone quickly makes a picture of some demo station or floor booth in the hours leading up to the conference. While I can't get enough of you talking about the news, leaks, and rumors on the EZA podcast, I am not tuning into your live reaction streams to get the latest news and bits. I am not watching those as a substitute for what may be happening on Twitter, Kotaku, and 4chan. I am tuning in for your genuine, authentic, and unspoiled reactions, and I want to explore all the surprises together with you. So those few precious hours of live reaction streams that we have every year should be the one exception where, in my opinion, it isn't your job to be an all-knowing source of news, but rather just 9 humans reacting to some emotional surprises. I'm not doing this editorial Snowcone guide to specifically answer this question, but to talk about Damiani might know everything. To talk about this stuff, but I'm sorry, to answer your question specifically, but more just to talk about leaks in general. So it's interesting that you bring up that this is part of our jobs, because like I know stuff that isn't going to be announced till E3 because I went to Judges Week. I know stuff that is going to be E3 because people email me stuff, which is not fine. You know, I've had some people that like couldn't help it while we were emailing with, and they were like, "Oh, by the way, I'm in the industry and I know this thing." And I'm like, "All right." I wish I hadn't known that, but I guess I know that now. I don't know if that's going to be revealed at E3, but okay, thanks for that. And of course, I take everything with a grain of salt that like this person could just be excited and maybe heard something. I have had stuff incorrectly spoiled for me. I have had friends close in the industry tell me something was going to happen and they were confused. They heard that bit of information and then later on I was like, "Oh, haha, I see what you thought that was," but that actually turned out to be a different project or that franchise, but not in the form that you thought it would take. And then of course there are spoilers. There are things that leak that just become headlines that we couldn't avoid if we wanted to. And there are some things that, like you said, are revealed that day. So yeah, I think it is a real fine line between knowing something and then not revealing it. Know the leaks, just don't discuss the leaks to us, basically. Yeah, it's tough. I think there are definitely circumstances outside of leaks. There are times when we're reviewing a game and we've played the game, written the review, maybe even sometimes when we're super lucky, cut the review, and then we have like a week or two before that review comes out. And so we'll be on streams and somebody will come up and, hey, I wonder if this game's going to do this thing. And you're just like, yeah, maybe. You know, like, I know the answer. I've played the game. And so it's not just E3 when we're confronted with the situation where we have information that you don't have. We can't be in a position to tell you that information, or in some instances, even like show that we have that information and that, you know, we could potentially spoil that if we wanted to. So yeah, I think what we need to do, and we have had many discussions about this, is to dial back that, oh, on my phone right now, this thing just happened, and I'm going to say it right in the microphone, you know? And so it would possibly be, behoove a Michael Damiani from not announcing something when he knows, immediately when he sees it. One thing that... on the other hand, though, even if we don't know stuff, sometimes we just get lucky. One time that I was very proud of, because it was later discussed by the team at Kojima Productions, and the great Hideo Kojima was present for the analysis of this video. But he and his staff looked at our reactions to his reveal at the Sony God of War concert big curtain presentation. Not last year, but the year before that. And... they came out and they said, you know, hey, we like to work with really interesting auteurs in the gaming community. And I leaned into the microphone and I was like, Kojima. Like, I knew it. I could just tell, okay, this is the moment where Kojima's going to happen. And the people that were working with Kojima, when they watched the video, they're like, he knows who it's going to be. They like pointed it out to him. Like, I don't know if you know this, but like, he knows. Like, you could see that guy. Like, he knew before you walked on stage that was going to be you. And so, I felt kind of bad, maybe, that, like, I spoiled it, but I just knew, you know? And so it's, like, part of that excitement that you're talking about. You're like, I'm just here for those reactions. Well, like, if the camera was rolling and the camera wasn't rolling, we would still be guessing at that stuff. We would still be shouting out, like, wait a minute, I think this is what this is. You know, it's like, the second you see that From Software logo, you know, like, we're all going to be excited because, like, okay, finally, we're going to see what Shadows Die Twice is. I think the first time we saw the Spider-Man trailer and it just went to a shot of New York, I was like, oh, Spider-Man, you know, like and somebody started talking. It's like, okay, that's Peter Parker. You can clearly tell this feels like Spider-Man. This is going to set up Spider-Man. So it's tough. Like, I will promise you that we will make an effort not to do that type of stuff. I can't promise you that stuff's not going to happen because I do not have control over E3 and what is going to be announced and when and who's going to be on the panel and who's going to be who's going to have access to a microphone at that point and who's going to feel like spoiling stuff. There has been a bit of pushback and there has been discussion when we talk about things in the podcast, when we talk about things on our live streams, that when we come in the morning, because we do a little bit of deliberation when you know, on the hour before a live stream starts. And so that is our last moment to kind of add up all of the news that we've heard, all of the stuff that we have heard. I guess I don't know. I think I was preparing my brain to pick another word there and it didn't happen. We're nearing the end of Cup of Jones and I'm running dry on my vocabulary, but that's tough because I'll give you an example. Splinter Cell. We should all be prepared for Splinter Cell at this point. I don't have some direct line with Ubisoft and knowing that's going to happen, but like, they teased Sam Fisher in Ghost Recon Wildlands so hard with such a wink that you're like, all right, you know. And then, you know, it was part of the Walmart leak, and you know, we talked about it when we were talking about the Xbox press conference, that like, yeah, it feels like a move that Xbox would make. The green logo, green Splinter Cell, it just like, there's a lot of that seems like an obvious synergy. You see Sony, you know, wrapping up, grabbing up a lot of exclusivity, not only with their incredible exclusive games that are just coming to PlayStation 4, but with exclusive content for multi-platform games, that it would make sense that Xbox is going to try to get out there and grab something exclusive. And so that's us just doing our homework and trying to put together what we think is likely. And so that might frustrate people, that like when that Splinter Cell, it finally happens, like the question now is, how is it going to be revealed, and not necessarily will it be revealed. We could still get to the end of E3 and not have Splinter Cell. That would be a big surprise, you know? And but it is frustrating because with how readily accessible social media is and how good technology is on camera phones, and the fact that no matter what, right until you announce something, you would then have to bring in a large staff to help produce these events, and inevitably you're going to get some caterer that just doesn't care and is like, haha, people working for 5 years ruined. Like, thanks, man. In just a moment, in just a fleeting flick of the wrist, you just made many people's lives difficult, or you possibly just took money out of their pockets because not a lot of people are going to pre-order the game now, or not a lot of people are going to buy that game because they now have preconceived notions going into the release that are not going to be met when the game is announced, and then now they're going to be disappointed, and then that disappointment is something that's really hard to cure once people aren't into a game when it launches, or when the campaign launches, when a game is first announced. I've always thought it'd be interesting because there are, like, you go see 3D games and you get 3D glasses. I always thought it'd be fascinating if you had some event and you like handed out glasses for the event that like you can't see the screen. Like you got to put the glasses on and then, oh, okay, now I can see what's on the screen. I thought it'd be really interesting to have that at events if you want to avoid spoilers. So like even if I wanted to take a screen grab, it would just be a big blurry mess. But I'm sure there's all sorts of issues when it comes to having stuff look really good at events like this that might prevent people from, being like, I didn't have glasses. Why is it blurry? All sorts of potential problems there. So yes, Snowcone Guy, we will take that under advisement, and we will try to do a better job this year than possibly we have done in the past, and be cautious of people that do not want to have stuff spoiled, and especially when super hot stuff comes up at the last minute. We will not necessarily. The trick is, I know you're like, hey, I don't come to here for the news. I come here just for you. But you have to understand, we it makes sense, and we very much enjoy doing a pre-show or a pre-shoe leading up to the press conference. We don't rule anything out. If it's a good shoe, we'll do a pre-shoe. And when people are like, all right, Electronic Arts press conference is about to start. Where do I want to watch it? Let's do it. And they're shopping around. And then they're like, I heard about that big leak this morning. I'm assuming Easy Allies is going to be talking about it. And then they like tune into Easy Allies, and we're not. And you're like, they don't know that happened? Come on, Easy Allies. You don't know that thing happened. Everybody's talking about it. The internet's talking about it. Everybody knows this thing is going to happen, and you're not talking about it. You could potentially be a dip in viewership. So again, it's that fine line of like, how relevant do we want to be in the interest of selling ourselves at this crucial time right before those press conferences start? And so... and ultimately, and this is one thing that I want to convey in the promos that we're going to be, releasing this week leading up to our E3 coverage, that, yeah, stuff gets leaked, but at the same time, we still don't see it. We still don't hear those publishers talking about stuff. We still don't see those reactions. We still don't get the nitty gritty details. Like Rage 2 has been announced, but we haven't really seen gameplay of that yet. We've seen gameplay-esque trailers, but we haven't really seen that raw stuff. And I think we're going to get that at the Bethesda press conference, obviously. And so I look forward not necessarily knowing like what this Rage thing is all about, but like really, really seeing it and really understanding that, and then having that discussion. And so what I think is happening, and probably what will happen in the present and future of E3 and Easy Allies coverage of E3, is that sustained, shocking lightning bolt moment is going to kind of become spread out. You'll get our reaction of when we first hear about that thing. You'll get the peak excitement of that thing finally coming to fruition at the press conference or from a trailer that we're watching, and then the slope of after the fact of us finally understanding this project, possibly getting to play it for ourselves, and then further continuing that discussion of what that could be. So that thing that you want might be a relic. It might be something that we're just moving past in this industry, and that's a bummer. I will conclude this leaks conversation by saying something that frustrates me about leaks, especially given having done Judges Week and having hung out with a lot of these people that are writing stories and publishing things about leading up to E3. And that's that there's nothing special about people who leak stuff. They have no special access that other people don't. They just don't care. And that's what's frustrating about leaks, is that when you see a leak, what frustrates me is when you see a leak happen and somebody is finally like, oh, whoops, that thing published on that, retail website, or whoops, I got my hand on this piece of swag for this, and so we got a game title now, and and oh, whoops, like that image, shouldn't have gone out, Mario plus Rabbids, or, every Assassin's Creed game ever, basically. And then after that, here's a hot take. Then after that leak happens, then you get all these other people that come out and they're like, oh, well, yeah, I mean, I know everything about that too. And it's like, yeah, but you know everything about that, not because I was in some private meeting, but because you just work in this business. It happens all the time that we get information, that you're at a party, that you're talking to someone that's working on a project. You hear something, you're like, oh, really? And they're like, yeah, this is a rumor I heard. Like I said, like I know some crazy stuff going into E3 that I wish I didn't know. But like, I'm not going to tell you. I'm not even going to tell you, even if that leaks. Even if you come to me, even if you DM me and you're like, Jones, I heard about this. Is there any truth to that? When I was at Judges Week, everybody's like, you don't have to tell everybody. You can just DM me. Is this game there? And I was like, haha, no, I'm not telling you. Because I love that excitement. I love it for the same reason the Snowcone guy loves that. And I think, not naming names, but I think there are people in this industry that are a little two-faced, that are kind of like, hey, we love surprises. Oh, by the way, let me spoil this entire thing for you. And it's like, pick a side, man. Like, pick the side that you're just going to spoil everything and you just don't care, or stop spoiling stuff. But don't have this weird kind of like back and forth to where you're like, I can't tell you that because it's a secret. It's like, well, last week you told us everything about this other thing. Why do you care? Like, why are you taking the high road now, when in the past you've clearly just been like, screw embargoes, screw relationships. I didn't sign any documents, so I don't care. But then, hey, we went to that publisher and we interviewed about this thing, and isn't that interview interesting? It's like, you don't care about that publisher. You just blew all their news out. You just basically took the many, 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 many days, weeks, months, years of development time and creative work that was poured into this project, and were just like, mine for today. Ha 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 ha. Ubisoft, mine. And that's just so selfish and gross and weird. I don't understand that, and I never will. As someone who likes trailers, I love that moment. As someone who loves trailers, as someone who is obsessed with trailers, I covet that moment when a creative body gets to sum up their vision in something and deliver it to the world unfiltered, unspoiled, pure in its sense. And I treasure those things. And it's weird when people say, oh, I treasure that too. But like, oh, that thing got leaked? Oh, well, then here's when it's coming out. Here's when it started development. Here's everything they wanted that to be. Here's all of their information. So you're not going to hear it from those people that actually created the thing. You're going to hear it from me. Send. Done. And it's like, great, thanks. It's like, whatever I can do to make that an announcement absolutely, completely uninteresting to you when it actually happens, I'm going to do that right now. Clickety clack, send. And like, that's frustrating. I think I've said that in the past. I think I feel that way, but just wanted to reiterate that, as long as we're talking about leaks. So I understand, Snowcone Guy, when you are frustrated about those things, and I will work very hard to make sure Easy Allies is not the second person you hear from, so that if something gets leaked, we're not going to be the person that immediately leaps onto that and is like, ha ha ha, we have all that information too. But you have to understand that when we are the 502nd person to get in line to reacting to these leaks and these spoilers that are coming out, it's kind of hard to be like, oh yeah, and then Splinter Cell, who knows what's going to happen to Splinter Cell? It's like, it's definitely going to be at the Ubisoft press conference. I don't know what that last game is going to be. I hope it's not that last game. Ubisoft has done a pretty good job of not spoiling whatever that last game is. And if we find out what that game is, I'm definitely going to tell all the other allies to shush, because that is a very special moment at the end of every Ubisoft press conference for like, whoa, that big final surprise. And I have heard from some people that they're like, hey, it's 2018. You just can't surprise people with anything anymore. And that's depressing. I think we still can. I think we still should respect these people that are creating this beautiful art that we love and enjoy, and give them that chance to at least announce it for themselves. And then it's ours, and then we get it for years and years, depending on how long it takes for development. And then we can just chew on everything that they release and just barf out all of our opinions about it. But when it comes to the announcement, just let them have it if you can. Person loading up E3, construction guy hired to just set up the lights outside of a booth, that it's like, oh, look at that. Please don't take a picture and put it up. Just stop. Just appreciate this moment that you've been given, where you're on the show floor and you've been shown what their stuff is like. I think that's the main reason that I don't reveal leaks, is like, that feels so great. It's such a great feeling. I feel so honored to be given that access to this stuff and be like, oh, You know, I've seen some stuff potentially leak from Judges Week that I'm like, oh, that leaked, that sucks. They wanted to announce that at E3, and that was so cool that I saw that and was like, oh, and they were like, don't say anything until E3, and I'm like, I won't. And it's so exciting. I'm filled with joy, so much more joy in holding that secret and keeping it to myself than any joy I would feel from like, haha, Twitter, clack, clack, clack. That I don't understand. I've tried to put myself in their shoes. I don't get it. I don't get people that get off on, you know, sending all that information out into the world. Because you're certainly not going to be famous. You're not going to make a YouTube channel out of this. You know, like some people like to get into rumors and stuff like that. And like that to me is different, you know, because a lot of those are wrong most of the time. But like when you really get that genuine leak, you know it's happening. You were at that meeting. You have that piece of merchandise. You're standing in front of that step and repeat. And you're like, oh, you know, it's like it's dawned on you. It's very clear that this thing is happening. Those people that are just like, haha. It's creative theft in a way. It's you taking that moment from those people and offering it up. And I know it's really easy to do. And some people do it accidentally. I know lots of voice actors have been like, yeah, I'm in this movie. Oh, crap. Was I not supposed to say that? And like mistakes happen. But if you're in the industry, if you're yourself a reporter, if you work for other outlets and you get the temptation to do that, just enjoy the exclusivity and bathe in that beautiful water of getting the opportunity to seeing that stuff before most people do, and then let the company tell everyone about that themselves. That is my moment that I will leave you with here on this episode. Lots of people directly referencing me, but I'm not reading that chat. I'm going to wrap up this episode because we're at 2 hours and 29 minutes. Another 2.5 hour episode of Cup of Jones. Remember, you have the power, Patreon, to not ask me so many damn questions every week. But if you do, I will answer them because that's the deal. Here we are. I'm going to go on voice rest for a little bit and go vote. Go vote, everybody, if you're in California. Thanks for watching, everybody. Cheers.